Good morning, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order, and if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. I'll ask the clerk to take roll.
Supervisor Lind?
Present.
Supervisor Anderson?
Present.
Supervisor Long?
Present.
Supervisor Leaf?
Present.
Supervisor Rice?
Present.
Supervisor Adams?
Present.
Supervisor Burning?
Present.
Supervisor Attino?
Present.
Supervisor Fiedler?
Present.
Supervisor Osnes?
Present.
Supervisor Barkalow?
Present.
Oh, sorry. Supervisor Shirley?
Present.
Supervisor Telejohn?
Present.
Supervisor Carlson?
Present.
Supervisor Swanepoel?
Present.
Supervisor Van Semmeren?
Present.
And Supervisor Ramberg.
Present.
Supervisor Carlson and Hanson are absent, excuse. Counter and Hanson, sorry.
All right, we have a quorum. At this point, I'll ask Judge Needham to provide you with your oaths of office.
And before you do that, let me just congratulations to all of the returning board members, but also to our new member who I know in a different iteration of her life. She's one of our CASA volunteers, so I've had the opportunity and privilege to work with Supervisor Rice in that capacity. I think this is my 15th time of swearing in county board members, which tells you I'm very old and I've been here a very long time, but it's always a privilege. This county board, any county board I've been privileged to work with, it's a privilege. Our partnership, two separate branches of government, is based on the respect that we have for each other, but also that mutuality of interest and making sure that the citizens of this county are well served. So congratulations for your election. We continue to offer our judicial ride-along. I know some of you have taken advantage of that. So anytime you'd like to sit up on the bench and see justice in real time, we welcome you to come up and sit with any judge for a portion of a day, a whole day, and you can contact me, Judge Nordstrand, Judge Black, or Judge Waterman, who pass on their congratulations as well, and do that. So without further ado, I'll ask that you all stand, and we're going to repeat the oath of office, but I think you'll note that I will say, I state your name, you will say I, but state your name. So with that said, raise your right hands, please. I, and state your name.
I,
having been elected to the office of County Board Supervisor.
having been elected to the office of County Board Supervisor,
Swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin.
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
And will faithfully and impartially
and will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of said office
discharge the duties of said office
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Yep, if you sign all those, the county clerk will collect those, and she'll take them to Judge Needham then for his signature. All right. The next item on the agenda is welcome by the county administrator and introductions. So we've been experimenting a little bit with the use of artificial intelligence to enhance the work that the county provides to become more efficient, really, for the taxpayers. And so today's opening remarks, I've asked ChatGPT to write a poem welcoming the new county board. So I'm going to read that for you now. So in a quiet town where fields stretch wide and hills roll gently side by side, there sits a seat of leadership true for a county board supervisor, tried and true. Uncontested, yet not without its grace, a re-election won in an unchallenged race. It speaks of trust, of deeds well done, of a leader whose journey has only begun. With vision clear and dedication strong, they've steered the county, righting wrongs. Their efforts felt in every corner, every street, their commitment making our community complete. Through meetings held and decisions made, they've sought progress, never afraid, to listen, learn, and adapt with care to ensure our county thrives beyond compare. So here's to the one who continues to serve, whose leadership we gratefully preserve. In their quiet victory we find delight, for they guide us toward a brighter, bolder light. Unopposed they may be in this electoral test, but their impact, their legacy stands the test. For in their steady hand we find our hope, our county board supervisor helping us cope. Well, the first time I read it, they were real tears, but.
I should write an ode to the county administrator, check.
Yes. Yeah. So we've been experimenting with the AI, and I plugged that in, and I thought that was very nice. So I thought I would share that with you for my opening remarks. But again, we look forward to the next 2 years of this county board serving and all the things that we have in store for you. There's a lot of them, so we look forward to that. At this point, we'll do introductions. I know we have just one new supervisor, but it's mostly for Supervisor Rice's benefit then. But we'll start with Supervisor Lind here, and you can just tell us, I guess, whatever it is you like about yourself, Supervisor Lind.
Hi, I'm Lisa Lind, and I showered today for the picture that's not happening.
Sean Anderson. This is my third term on the board.
Good morning, everybody. Bob Long, District 3. It's nice to see all the gentlemen with the tie. I feel like I should have worn my tie today, but maybe next time with the pictures. But this will be I started on the board in 2016, so I've been doing this for about 8 years and have really enjoyed it and gotten a lot of fulfillment out of it. So I'm sure you have a lot to look forward to, Carrie.
I'm Kathy Leaf. This is my third term, and I'm looking forward to working with you.
Well, I'm Carrie Rice, but if you say Reese, I'll still respond. It's fine. My family just goes by the pronunciation Rice. I grew up in Prescott, but I spent most of my adulthood living in Troy Township and worked in St. Paul. And when I retired in 2016, I decided to focus my energies here on the community that has served me and my family so well. So I really appreciate the opportunity to meet you all and serve the people of St. Croix County. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome. Good morning, I'm Paul Adams still, and second term on the board. Really enjoy everybody and everything that we do here to make our county and community the best it can be.
Paul Burning from the city of Hudson, Wisconsin, and I'm here because I enjoy policy and serving our community. So,
Rick Otino, and I serve most of Hudson Township, about half of Hudson Township, excuse me. And it was interesting the other day, I had somebody identify me for, I think, the first time since I've been on the board for, what, three terms? And guess who he was? He was a bicyclist. If you remember my vote on the bicycle path.
Oh, yeah.
They got me pegged.
Good morning, Bob Fiedler, and I represent most of the town of Troy, but the other half is represented by my good colleague, Supervisor from River Falls, mostly, and look forward to a great couple of years. Thanks.
Good morning, I'm Dave Osnes. I just finished up my 14th year on the county board, so I'm starting my 8th term, and it's nice to see some very familiar faces sitting around us today. So, and I welcome our new young lady. So, thank you.
I'm Ryan Shirley. This is my second term. Basically, the south half of the city of New Richmond is what I represent, and looking forward to the next 2 years.
Good morning, Greg Telejohn, representing District 14, which is Aaron Prairie, Richmond Township, and a little bit of Warren. I first was on the board when there was 31 board members here and served 2 years and couldn't do it anymore because all the meetings were during the day and I had to work. So, but this is my start of my third term also, and enjoy the county work, and welcome.
I'm Mark Carlson, District 15, which is Pleasant Valley up through Warren and Roberts. I really appreciate the people on this board. I've had occasion to sit in board meetings, and I won't say the name of the counties, and those guys were mean to each other. And it made me realize how good a group we have here. So, and Carrie, you'll fit right in and enjoy the group also, I believe.
And I'm Mike Barkalow. I represent District 16, which is Hammond, the village of Hammond, and the township of Rush River. It's my second term, and really have grown a lot in knowing what goes on here, and really appreciate all of you guys. I look forward to working with you again. So.
I'm Bob Swanapool. I'm from District 17. It takes in the other side of the county, Glenwood City, Deer Park, and so on. The St. Croix County Fair is in Glenwood City, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you.
Jerry Van Zomeren from beautiful downtown Baldwin, Wisconsin, where I've lived all my life. I represent that area too. District 18 is pretty much all the village of Baldwin, a little bit of the town of Baldwin, north of town for a few miles. My second term, I've enjoyed it. It's a challenge sometimes. It's interesting to see, and it's wonderful really to see this group working together for the betterment of the county, for the betterment of the people of the county. So I challenge you to join in with us. I'm glad to have you with us today. Thank you.
I'm Tim Ramberg, District 19. I represent Town of Springfield, Katy, O'Galley, Town of Baldwin, a little bit of Town of Baldwin, and Village of Woodville, all of the Village of Woodville down in the corner there. And I'm retired in 2017. I was a highway commissioner for the county, and I've lived here my whole life. Down by Baldwin. When my father lost his hair, we moved to Baldwin. So anyway, welcome. Thank you.
Well, that was very nice. Thank you, everyone. At this point, I'll turn it over to Corporation Counsel Amos, and she'll conduct the election for chairperson.
Thank you. So we are going to now do the election of the chairperson, and this is pursuant to Article 2 of the County Board Rules. So how this will work is I will open up the floor for nominations. You just need one person. You don't need a second for a nomination. And then once the nominations are closed, we will either do the voting by open vote or by secret ballot if there is a motion. And then we will see what the votes are. So at this time, I would like to open the floor for nominations. Supervisor Burney?
I'd like to nominate Supervisor Long to be chairman of this board.
Any other nominations? Any other nominations? One more time, any other nominations? Okay, I will close nominations for county chairperson. The one nomination is for Supervisor Bob Long. Because there's only one nomination, I would just ask for a voice vote. So all those in favor of Supervisor Long being chairperson, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, vote nay. Okay, that nomination is passed 17-0. And so Supervisor Long, if you would like to come up and sit in the chair seat, you
I just put it up.
ChatGPT help you with that?
AI told me who would win.
Yes. No, you can take over now. The next agenda item is election of the vice chair.
Okay, first of all, I really want to thank everybody for your support. I kind of fell into this about 2 years ago and a little unexpectedly, and there was definitely a learning curve. There was much, much more to this role than I ever really imagined. But I've learned a lot, and I hope I've served you well. I've tried to serve with as much integrity and dignity and humility as possible. I also want to emphasize that it's really important that I get feedback. I need your ideas, I need your suggestions, I need your criticism, whatever the case may be, so that we can collectively work together and make a lot of progress in the next 2 years. So I very humbly thank you for your support. So I guess at this point, I'll open the floor for nominations for vice chair. Supervisor Osnes?
Nominate Supervisor Fiedler.
Supervisor Fiedler. Other nominations? Other nominations? One last time, other nominations? Okay, I will close the nominations. We have one nomination for Supervisor Fiedler for vice chair. What's that?
I'm just giving you a copy, so you have it.
Oh, I have a copy. I just didn't pull it out yet. Then we will proceed, I guess, with a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries 17-0. Congratulations, Supervisor Fiedler. I will make real quick mention that Supervisor Fiedler has been a blessing for me as the chair for the last 2 years. I think we've worked exceptionally well together. He's been a tremendous help. So it's been really a great partnership. So I welcome the opportunity to work with you, Bob, for the next 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I can just echo all the comments you made earlier about your service and the collegiality that this board enjoys, and certainly our mutual efforts to do the very best we can for the county with the highest integrity. Thanks to everybody.
Okay, we're going to move on to appointments, confirmation of county administrator appointments to the Health and Human Services Board.
Just one comment real quick. I didn't get the committee preference forms from everyone. There's a few outstanding. So if you have not turned it in to me, if you could still please turn it in so that I can provide that information to the county board chair for his appointments to the standing committees. So there's a number outstanding. I won't call you out specifically, but. And then I think the chair is looking for a motion on the HHS board appointments.
Do we have a motion on the HHS board appointments? Anyone? Supervisor Osnes and a second by Supervisor Burning. We don't need any discussion.
Well, they can discuss it if they want to. Yeah, it's reappointing the same people that are currently on there.
Right.
The other two supervisors that are on there, their appointment is not up. That's why you don't see their name on the list. They're still on, though. So there's no changes to HHS committee.
Okay, let's move ahead with a voice vote. All those in favor of the appointments signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. All right, now we're going to move on to our presentation, roles and responsibilities. Sarah Dietrich Kastorf, I believe, is with us today. Aren't we privileged? Thank you for joining us, Sarah.
Thank you so much. And we are awaiting Andy Phillips to join us via Zoom as well. Once Andy gets here, he'll do a he'll do the bulk of the presentation, but he had to speak to the Ozaki County Board this morning and then drive from Ozaki County to Milwaukee in order to get on to his computer to do this. So in the interim, I am going to get the presentation started, but before I do, I'm going to make a couple of shameless plugs for the association as well. So I'm Sarah Diedrich Hasdorf. I'm the Director of Outreach and Member Engagement at the Wisconsin Counties Association. So it is my job to be a resource basically to all members of county boards all across the state. If you have just these oddball questions or things you're just wondering about or you need a little assistance with, I'm the person generally that you would call at WCA for those types of questions, and it's my job to make sure that I get you guys an answer. The other thing I want to mention and bring to your attention as well is there are a number of things that are on your desk today that have come from WCA. So I just want to very quickly bring those to your attention. First, just for fun, I brought you guys little stickers today of all of the counties across the state. They look really lovely on your water cups or on your computers or however it is you wish to use it. I do have a lot more of these stickers with me as well, so if there's staff that are here that would like some stickers, please let me know. I know when I take these to to various conferences I attend, I know they're very popular, so folks certainly like these, and I have plenty of them if other folks want some. In addition to this, we also have, you have a welcome packet from WCA. There are a few things that are included in that welcome packet I want to bring to your attention. The first is this document, Listen, Learn, Lead. Now, I know you only have one new member on your county board, but again, I actually talked to folks that have been on the board a number of years, and they tell me that attending the county officials workshops is actually much more useful and helpful to them the second or third time around as opposed to the first time around. So what this is county officials workshops. It's training, all-day training that we put on in partnership with UW-Madison Division of Extension, Local Government Education, and as part of that, it's a day-long training on all the things you'll need to know to be an effective county board supervisor. So I don't know how many of you have attended in the past, but I highly encourage you to attend. We also have included in that packet as well this brochure called Wisconsin Counties Association. This tells you about the services and programs that are offered by our organization. Then we have this lovely County Officials Handbook. Anything you've ever wanted to know about county government in your role as a supervisor and the services provided by counties are included in here. This is also on our website as well. If you don't want to carry the book around with you, you can access it from your iPads. And then finally, the last thing I just wanted to bring your attention to is this Parley Pro motion card. This is something that everybody should have with them at all times when you're on the county board floor or in your committees. It helps you to know what motions are appropriate at what specific times, as well as whether these motions are debatable, whether they need a second, and whether it's a majority vote or a 2/3 vote in order for that motion to pass. If you come to the county officials workshops, I'll go over with you guys how to use the card. So there's a little teaser for the county officials workshops. All right, so I don't think we have Andy yet, but that's okay, because in the interest of time, I will get us started, and then as soon as Andy comes along, we'll turn it over to Andy. All right, so let's see here. Make sure I do this correctly. Oh, how am I getting? There we go, the arrow key. Different computers, it's all different things, and I have a Mac, so it never seems to work. All right, so let's talk a little bit about roles and responsibilities. So if you have a question about county government, probably the first place that you would look is Chapter 59 of the statutes. Chapter 59 is really what sometimes I call the Bible of county government, because it's Chapter 59 that really tells you about the role of the county board. It talks about county authority. It talks about our governance structures. It talks about the powers and duties of our county officers. So there are a lot of things with regard to how county government operates that are found in Chapter 59 of the statutes. So if you had a question about statutory authority of counties and that type of thing, probably the first place you would want to look is Chapter 59 of the statutes. Now that being said, well, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Chapter 59 today. There's also so many other chapters of the Wisconsin state statutes that you'll need to be familiar with as well. Chapter 19 of the statutes, for example, talks about the public records law, the open meetings law, the code of ethics for local public officials, and I believe you're going to hear about some of that stuff later on in your agenda. My apologies, I'm not going to be able to stay for that as much as I'd like to. I'm speaking to your neighboring county this afternoon at 2 o'clock. So I need to leave very shortly after we're done presenting here. My apologies again, because I like usually to stay for a full board meeting. And then there's also lots of other chapters of the statutes as well that talk about services that are provided by county government. Oftentimes we'll refer to those as the mandated services, services that we are required to provide on behalf of the state. So for example, just in the area of health and human services alone, you'll want to know about chapters 46, 48, 51, 55, 938. If we want to talk about highways, that's chapter 83. Public health, you'll start finding those things in chapter 252. So there's a lot of statutes that talk about what it is county governments do, but for the most part, especially for board members, you will probably want to be most familiar with chapter 59. Now, in no way, shape, or form am I suggesting that you go and you read chapter 59 from cover to cover unless you can't fall asleep at night, because if you want to fall asleep, pick up a statute book and read it. It is extremely dry. Only nerdy people like me who find county government interesting. As I was telling Supervisor Osmus earlier, my first day at WCA, I don't think they knew what to do with me, and they said, you know what? Why don't you start by reading chapter 59 of the state statutes? Now, I was 21 years old, freshly out of college. Those statutes meant absolutely nothing to me because I had no context around them. But I will tell you now, when I read chapter 59, I find it much more engaging. And again, that's the nerd in me. So, when we look at chapter 59 does define counties as bodies that are corporate, and they can sue and they can be sued. And the counties really exercise our authority as a body corporate through the adoption of resolutions and through the enactment of ordinances. And I don't want to be rude here, but Andy just sent me a text. Oh, he's just leaving Ozaki now, so he's going to be a while. Okay, so you may just end up with me today. I apologize. He's much more engaging than I am, but we'll go with it. All right. So again, as I said, counties exercise their powers through the adoption of, ordinances and resolutions. But one thing it is important to keep in mind, and you'll hear me say this multiple times throughout this particular presentation, is that a lot of county powers are limited by state statute and by the state constitution. So how many of you guys have served in city government or municipal government? Okay. Municipal government has constitutional home rule authority, whereas counties do not. And that is probably one of the biggest differences between counties and municipalities. Because we don't have as counties constitutional home rule authority, we can only undertake such powers as are expressly given to us by statute. So if it's not in statute or in the Constitution, we as counties can't do it. Whereas for municipal governments, they can undertake any powers and authority so long as it is not prohibited by state statute. So that's a pretty fundamental difference, I would say, between county government and municipalities. And again, that really comes from the history of county government, when we really stop and take a look at the fact that counties were created to carry out the services of the territorial governments, which means that is why we are created, to do the work of others. So again, counties, our primary, role, they will say, is to carry out state services. I just want to talk a little bit about administrative home rule as well. Nope, you know what? I'm going to wait till the next slide to talk about that. So the last thing I want to talk about in this slide is sizes of county boards. If you've seen one county board, you have seen one county board. And they say the same with counties. You've seen one county, you've seen one county. And I'll get to that under administrative home rule. But also county boards, county board size, there is a maximum number of county supervisors that each county can have based on population that is set in state statute. So you don't have the ability in St. Croix County to say we want to have a county board of 100. It just doesn't exist. Now, that being said, many years ago, we used to see county boards that were much, much larger in size. It wouldn't have been unusual many years ago to see a county board that had 75 people on it. Now, could you imagine how long your board meetings would last if you had 75 members on your board and everyone took all of their minutes to speak as they're allowed under Robert's rules? You'd be meeting for days, right? So most counties have obviously downsized their boards since then. But across the state of Wisconsin, our county boards range in size from 7 to 38. So I always like to play a little game. Which county board in the state of Wisconsin only has 7 members? Nope, not Bayfield. Nope, not Milwaukee. Although the legislature did actually, by statute, downsize the Milwaukee County Board. So 7. Nope. Not Russ, not Price. I was going to say, if you look at your sticker and start naming off all the counties, eventually somebody will get it right. Right? Now, who said Menominee? Yep, it's Menominee. Okay? All right. So the next question is, if Menominee has 7, which county has 38? Not Milwaukee. No, the legislature downsized Milwaukee. It is not Dane. Dane is 37, I believe. But it is close. Marathon, that's correct. And it is just coincidental that Marathon also happens to be the largest county in the state of Wisconsin via square miles. So yes. So, all right. There. That was the fun part of the presentation. All right. Now let's talk about administrative home rule. So until the mid-1980s, counties didn't really have any authority over their own administrative structures. So counties went to the state legislature and said, look, we understand we don't have that constitutional home rule authority that the Constitution provides to municipalities, but we think we should have some sort of authority over our own internal structures. So the legislature granted to counties what is known as administrative home rule. And under that particular statute, it says every county may exercise any organizational or administrative power subject only to the Constitution and to any enactment of the legislature which is of statewide concern and which uniformly affects every county. So basically what that means is this is where we see the differences in how all of the 72 counties and why you look different and why you operate somewhat differently. So for example, not every county puts all of the same services within the same department. That's because of administrative home rule. Not every county has the same committees of their county board. That is because of administrative home rule. Now, again, as I said earlier, we don't have a lot of authority where they haven't placed limitations on us. So there is some limitations with our administrative home rule authority as well. And probably the best example of this was back in 2010. The Ozaukee County Administrator asked the Attorney General whether or not the administrator could give their appointment authority over boards and commissions to the county board chair. They said at the time that, look, the county board chair is making all of the other appointments to our committees. It makes some sense, they thought, for the county board chair to make those appointments to the boards and commissions as well. And the Attorney General opined at the time that no, that because the state statutes specifically give the authority for appointments to boards and commissions to county administrators, that would go beyond the scope of what administrative home rule authority allows. So again, you have authority, but again, some limitations are placed on that. Now, self-organization. I have to admit, I forgot to look yesterday before I came here. Do you know, are you guys a self-organized county? You are. All right. I see you nod. That's good, because there are some county boards I'll go to. Are you self-organized? And they'll go, we don't know. And my list is back in my office. All right. So self-organization, that's a statute that was passed in the mid-1970s. And it gives counties flexibility basically with regard to 3 different things that a county board can do. Before I talk about those 3 things, in order for a county to become self-organized, a county has to not only adopt an ordinance indicating that the county is intending to become self-organized, but you also have to file that particular ordinance with the Secretary of State's office. If you don't file it with the Secretary of State's office, then they don't know about it, it's not official, and you're not really self-organized. And I actually just worked with a county over the last couple of years that had passed self-organization, but the Secretary of State had no record of it, so we had to have them go through the process again and make sure that that was filed correctly with the state. But once you become a self-organized county, that doesn't do anything for you. You have to take additional action to, if you wish to use any of the powers that you are provided once you are self-organized. So the 3 powers that you have when you become a self-organized county is the use of staggered terms. Now that is an authority that not a single county in the state has taken advantage of, nor would I ever recommend that any county move to staggered terms. And I'd be willing to bet every county clerk in the state of Wisconsin would support my recommendation that no county move to staggered terms. Imagine if you had to have county board elections every single year. Imagine if you had to reconstitute your committees then every single year. Imagine if every single year you had to work with your board and do board, board training. You would get nothing done as a county board because all you'd be doing is educating yourselves, every single year, and you wouldn't have a lot of time to get your work done. So use of staggered terms, don't do it. The other 2 things where we tend to see counties, implement a little more is compensation of supervisors. Under state statute in Chapter 59, there's a limitation with regard to the number of committees and the number of board meetings that members of the county board can be reimbursed for during the year. If you're self-organized county, you can exceed or decrease, whatever your county chooses, that maximum level or number of meetings you can be reimbursed each year for are. In addition to that, as a self-organized county, you also have the ability to allow county board members to receive salaries as opposed to per diems. And then finally, if you're a self-organized county, you can choose the manner in which you wish to fill vacancies. Non-self-organized counties, if there's a vacancy on the board, it is filled by an appointment by the board chair, confirmed by the full board. If you're self-organized, I suppose you could hold a special election. I was aware of that happening one time in Dane County when there was a vacancy on the board. Otherwise, I think most counties don't utilize that provision of self-organization either. And there are 53 counties in the state that have elected to become self-organized. All right, so now I'm going to move on and talk about the forms of county government. Now, each county in the state of Wisconsin has to have one of 3 forms of county government. You either have to have a county executive, you either have to have a county administrator, or you have to have a county administrative coordinator. Now, I'm showing you this map, but what I'm going to tell you right now is don't question me on some of these colors and what these look like. This isn't even, we don't even put this together. This is put together by a consultant, and we steal their map that they share with us. But there are a number of counties across the state, 53 in total, that have full-time dedicated positions. 12 of those counties have county executives. 33 of those counties, approximately, have appointed full-time county administrators. 8 of those counties have full-time appointed administrative coordinators. And then the other 19 counties, because as I said, you're required to have either an executive, an administrator, or an administrative coordinator. Those other 19 counties that don't have a full-time position have to appoint somebody within the county and give them the title of administrative coordinator. So what those all look like varies amongst the counties. So in 8 counties, their county clerk serves as that administrative coordinator. In 4 counties, it's the county board chair. Now, not going to be an issue here, but there's actually an attorney general's opinion that says that serving as the administrative coordinator and the county board chair are incompatible. So we try to tell these 4 counties and work with them and say, hey, maybe we should take a look at your county structure. But again, it's all very different. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because you guys have a county administrator, great system. I have to say we are working. That is really the trend that we are seeing across the state right now, is more and more counties over the last few years are working toward a full-time position, many of them going to a full-time administrative coordinator. I can tell you right now as well, Andy Phillips and I are working with probably at least a handful of counties right now to take a look at their county board structures and see whether or not a county, either a full-time county administrator or full-time county administrative coordinator would work with those particular counties. So again, because you guys don't have a county executive, and I can't imagine a board wanting to make that decision to move to a county executive, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the administrative coordinator, the county exec, but let's talk a little bit about the county executive position. That position is elected by the electors of the county. You would probably most compare that to, say, the governor or the president of the United States. They were like, the county executive is that chief administrative officer of a county government. And as such, and because they are an elected position, they are accountable to the voters within their county. So they are not accountable to the county board, which means the county board does not have authority over the county executive position, and the county board does not have the authority to remove the county executive. Very similar to, I think, some of the functions we'll talk about under the county administrator position. The county executive will, present a budget to the county board. They will appoint department heads subject to confirmation by the full county board. Probably one of the biggest differences between the administrator and the executive is that the county executive does have veto authority over the actions of the county board. Of course, the county board then does have the authority to override those actions of the county executive. But because you don't have that, we're going to move right along here, and let's talk about the county administrator. Now, the county administrator position is found in 5918 of the statutes, and the county administrator is an option for counties that have a population of 750,000 or less. So again, the only county in the state that has a population over 750,000 is Milwaukee. Milwaukee is required to have an executive. Other counties can choose their form of government. So the position of county administrator is created by petition and referendum or by resolution of the county board. So I'm guessing back how many years ago now, St. Croix County adopted a resolution indicating that they wish to adopt the county administrator form of county government. The county administrator is appointed by a majority vote of the county board. The county administrator basically serves as the chief administrative officer of the county. And their duties and powers really, by statute, state that their job is to coordinate and direct all administrative and management functions of the county government that is not vested by law with other officers, boards, or commissions. The one thing, the reason we tend to like the county administrator position at our association, and I know I'm not supposed to have a preference, but I do. When I speak to counties that don't have an administrator and are looking at their type of government, I don't tell them I have a preference, but since you have it, I will. And the reality is, with a county administrator, I say there's a very clear delineation and distinction of duties and powers, which makes it very easy for everyone to understand who to go to when there is an issue, who is in charge of what. In counties that don't have a county administrator, it is very unclear. So again, the county administrator appoints and removes and supervises department heads subject to board confirmation. And, and when we have a county administrator, at that point, the department head supervises the administration of the department, and then the county board's role is to perform advisory or policy-making functions authorized by statute. And again, this comes directly from 5918 of the state statutes. And we'll talk a little more about the role of the county board in just a few slides here. Again, 5918 indicates that it is the role of the county administrator to appoint members to boards and commissions, and to submit an annual budget to the county board for their approval. The state statutes also go on to talk about, and this is the only place in the state statute that, we don't see this for administrative coordinators, we don't see this for executives, but if a county is going to hire a county administrator, 5918 of the statutes talks a little bit about what it is county boards should look for when they're hiring a county administrator. So they talk about the county administrator having to be appointed solely on merit, and that the board shall give due regard to training, experience, administrative ability, and general qualifications and fitness for performing the duties of the office. The statute also goes on to say that no weight or consideration shall be given by the board to residence, to nationality, or to political or religious affiliation when a county is filling the position of county administrator. Now, the county administrator is the one sole employee of the county board. So the county board has a lot of authority over the county administrator. Not only does the county board have the authority to hire the county administrator, but the county board also has the authority under statute to remove the county administrator as well. If there is a vacancy within the county administrator position, then it is up to the county board to fill that vacancy by appointment by majority vote of the county board. And again, the two biggest differences between the position of county executive and the position of county administrator is that the county administrator is accountable to the county board. So again, you're single sole employee. You have an issue. Something has arisen. You have a question. You go see Ken, because Ken is your single employee as the county board. So the county executive, by contrast, is accountable to the public. Again, you as a county board, if you had an executive, would have no authority over that position. And then finally, your county administrator does not have veto authority. Again, I don't really want to spend a lot of time talking about an administrative coordinator because it's exceedingly rare for anybody to go from a county administrator position back to an administrative coordinator position. And the reason for that, I will say, is because the statutes don't really define what it is that the administrative coordinator does. So in counties that have administrative coordinators, I hope they have very good job description and a very good policy that explains what it is that that administrative coordinator does, because the statutes don't really provide any guidance whatsoever. The position looks different in every county. Again, as we looked at that map, it could be the county clerk. In one county, it was their IT director. So it looks very different. And then it becomes very unclear if an issue arises within the county, whose role or responsibility is it to take care of that administratively? In St. Croix County, it's very clear. It's the role of your county administrator. In counties with administrative coordinators, none of that is clear. And again, there's just no statutory direction whatsoever with regard to that particular position. All right, so let's talk about you guys now. Members of the County Board of Supervisors, what is your role and what are your responsibilities as members of the board? So, as a member of the county board, you serve primarily in a legislative capacity. So that means that you are exercising the authority, again, as we talked about earlier, of the board, of the county as a body corporate, and you do that, again, through the adoption of resolutions and the enactment of ordinances. Now, that being said, you guys also perform your legislative functions in a number of different ways. When you adopt your county budget, for example, you are setting very much so the policy direction for your county over the next year, because as part of that budget, depending upon what you choose to fund, those tend to be your priority issues. In addition to that, you also adopt and perform that legislative function through the adoption not only of resolutions and ordinances, but you adopt plans. You might adopt a comprehensive plan. You might adopt a strategic plan. You might adopt a land use plan as a member of the board. And again, that is all part of your role as serving in a legislative capacity. As a board, though, all of your work is done on a cooperative decision-making, through a cooperative decision-making process. That means that no individual member of the board has the authority to adopt policy on behalf of the board. No operational control rests with members of the board as well. And we'll talk about that a little more in a little bit. But again, everything that you do as the board is done very much so cooperatively. If we were to go back and look at Chapter 59 of the statutes, I would say we're very hard pressed to find a place where it says an individual county board member does this or does that. Instead, we may see, for example, it'll say in like 5952, 5953, I think, it'll talk about the county board of supervisors shall, or a county board may. It always references the board as a collective, never as individual members of the board. Again, recognizing that as a board, you work as a cooperative, you work together to determine what the policy direction is going to be for your county. Again, we talk an awful lot about the supervisor's authority being collective versus individual. We also talk a little bit about the fact that it is not the role of the county board. Again, your role is to set policy. We talked about under the role of the county administrator, it is the county administrator's role to run the day-to-day operations of the county as the head of the administration department of your particular county. So the question that we always are left with is, because you guys are called county supervisors, do you really supervise anything? Do you? No? No. It's really a misnomer in terms of your name, because it is not your job, it is not your role as a member of the county board to go into the individual county departments and start, telling county employees or department heads how to do their job. That's what you guys have hired a county administrator for, to make sure that the policies that you guys have developed are being implemented correctly within county administration. But do you really supervise anything? No. And of course, this says jokingly, thank you, legislature, for creating a confusing name. So again, as a county board, you adopt policy and you hold staff accountable for implementing that policy, and you do that through county administration. One of the most important roles that we talk about for county board members is that you really serve as a visionary. Now, how many times do you guys go home and your dog or your spouse or whoever greets you at the door really thanks you for the role that you serve as being a visionary? People call you visionaries, but that's really what your job is on the county board. I bet you didn't know that, huh? You guys play a very important role here, because when you're serving that role as a visionary, instead of dealing with the day-to-day operations of the county, you guys have the tougher job, trying to figure out what it is you want your county to look like 2, 5, 10, 15 years from now, right? That's a difficult task, because you guys are really asked, and you're asked to really think about what it is our county should be doing. What is it that the citizens of our county desire us to do? And it's a huge, huge role. And you guys do that again through the adoption of your strategic plan, through your budgets, all of that stuff. But we really can't discount the important role that you guys play in setting that vision and setting that direction for your county long term. It's huge, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand it and chat about that much. So when we talk about, your overall goal being policymakers and being visionaries, but obviously we know there's these day-to-day things that you do as well as part of the county board. You involve, represent, and be accountable to the public. I'm going to get back to that one. You also determine what services are going to be provided. You need to adopt a budget and set a tax levy, but really your primary function is to enact policy. Now, you're also supposed to attend your meetings, right? Attend your meetings, vote, participate in discussion. All of these are things you do. But sometimes we start to see a blur between where that role as a policymaker is and where that oversight role and that day-to-day operational role. Sometimes those lines can blur a bit. And I think that we see these lines blur a bit when, as a county board supervisor, and I'm sure this has never happened to you, you guys ever gotten calls from constituents? And when you get calls from constituents, are they usually just calling you to pat you on the back and telling you what a great job you're doing on the county board? Or do they usually want to call you because they have a concern or a complaint, right? And this is where sometimes we have to be careful that we're not blurring those lines. Because when somebody calls you and they give you a complaint, and I believe your highway commissioner is on the line here. So let's say there's a pothole that is in front of somebody's house and they live on the county highway and they're not too pleased about it and they call you. What do you do about it? Are you guys getting out a wheelbarrow and a shovel and some hot mix and running to that constituent's house and filling in that pothole? No. You're probably either contacting your county administrator or your highway commissioner and letting them know about the pothole and letting them follow county policy and process with regard to how we fix that pothole, right? But what if it's not a pothole? What if somebody calls your county and calls you particularly as a supervisor because they had an interaction that they didn't think was overly positive with a county employee or a program in which they were participating in? What do you do then? You go to your county administrator, right? As the single employee of the county board, you go to Ken. So anytime there's a complaint, you go see Ken. What we always like to tell counties is make sure you are aware of what your county complaint policy is. Because I don't want to get phone calls I don't like it when I get phone calls from counties where I hear a county board member came into my department and started talking to my employee because they got a complaint from a citizen. When you get these complaint calls, you can thank your citizen for calling, but please do not agree with what the citizen is telling you and tell them you will make sure it gets taken care of, because we don't know what the full story is. All you've heard is one side of the story, which is, again, why you go to Ken or your department heads, depending upon what your county policy is, and you let them know that there is an issue, and they will take care of it, ensuring, of course, that county policy is being followed. And I know sometimes it is really hard when somebody calls you and you're an elected official and you want to do the right thing and you want to help them. That's why you guys ran for the county board, right? Because you want to help people. You want to make sure that everything is running smoothly within your county. But again, as elected supervisors, we can't always fix everything. And we have to make sure, not only for legal reasons, but we have to make sure that we are following the appropriate procedures as well. Yes. Microphone.
Kind of along with that one, if a supervisor is getting some very positive comments.
Yes.
What's your take on that one, and where should we go with that?
If a supervisor's getting positive comments, you should have a party. You should celebrate it. You should say, wow, that rarely happens, right? No. I mean, if you are getting positive comments, certainly make sure that those get shared. Share them with Ken and make sure, he knows that, hey, somebody contacted me and let me know that your human services department did a great job doing something today. Everybody likes to hear those positive comments. So make sure you send those along as well. Those are the things I worry less about, in terms of how we react to those. But absolutely, make sure you share those as well. Everybody likes to hear positive comments. All right, this is a sample county board rule. I like to put it up here. This came from Chippewa County. And the reason I put it in is because I think it really very clearly and succinctly defines what everybody's role is. Within their county board rules, it says that the role of the county board is to set strategic mission and priorities for the county, establish the general policies by which the county is guided in its management of county affairs, consider and act upon resolutions and ordinances, provide financial oversight, and build community relationships in support of the mission and priorities. The county board appoints the county administrator and monitors the county administrator's management of the daily operations and implementation of policy. See, we could have skipped everything, right, and just went right to here. All right, now let's talk about the role of the county board chair. The role of the county board chair, there are specific statutory role found in 5912 of the state statute. So obviously the county board chair presides over meetings, administers oath, countersigns ordinances, These are all the things that are listed in statute that the county board chair does. But we know the chair does much more than that as well. The chair commonly may act as the spokesperson for the county board. They will provide guidance and direction on how issues should move through the county board. It is the job of the county board chair to ensure that your county board rules are enforced. And again, I always ask county board members, please respect the role of the chair when they are trying to enforce the rules of the county board. It is their job to enforce the rules that you as a county board have adopted. And again, 5913 of the statutes as well talks about the role of the county board chair in appointing members to your county committees. All right, let's talk a little bit about standing committees. Because in the state of Wisconsin, we operate through a strong committee structure, which means before any item is typically brought before the full county board, it gets vetted by a county committee. It is those county committees that may hold a public hearing and allow members of the public to speak on issues. It is at the committee where you're going to get all the detail from your county experts, be it your department heads or other managers within the county. It is at your county committee where you're going to have that debate and really try to figure out, should we move this resolution forward, should we not? Or if an issue comes before a committee that maybe there's not a resolution and you guys are thinking about what that resolution is going to look like, it is at that particular committee meeting where you're going to hash out what your recommendation is going to be to the full county board. So oftentimes we will say that a lot of the heavy lifting with regard to these policy decisions that you guys are going to make as a full board is really done at the committee level. And so committees typically will also provide policy oversight for departments and offices and other entities. So while you are not going to manage the day-to-day operations of a county department, you can certainly, as a committee, make sure that your policy is being adhered to. Oftentimes that will take the form of a department head coming to your committee meeting and providing you a report with regard to what it is they're doing on particular policy priorities of the board. Is also, depending upon the county, isn't unusual for a county committee to review and make budget recommendations that affect the departments over which that particular committee may have policy oversight over. So really, the role of the county committee is really to be, strong advocates with regard to policy development. All right, let me just see. This may be. Yep, I think we already talked about that. We'll skip that one. All right, now let's move on to staff roles and responsibilities. Again, staff really has two jobs. One is to, carry out the policy direction provided by the county board. And the second job of staff is to really make recommendations and give professional advice. I know oftentimes before I had my current job, I was a lobbyist at the association for 30 years, and I worked primarily on health and human services issues. I can tell you as a lobbyist, I am not an expert on social work and health and human services issues. I am not. And so oftentimes when a bill would come and be introduced in the legislature that affected issues related to health and human services, I would reach out to the Wisconsin County Human Services Association and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? And I think oftentimes that is kind of what the relationship oftentimes between the staff and the board and staffing committees is you will go look to your department heads when an issue comes before them and comes before you and you may say, what do you think? How will this impact our county? How will this impact the work that you're doing? Is this going to cost us additional money? Will we need to hire additional staff in order to implement this particular policy? So again, I highly recommend that you utilize your staff and recognize as well that your staff members make professional, they will give you, their professional opinion. They're not going to necessarily sit there and tell you, you need to do this or you need to do that. But instead, they will answer the questions that you have to the best of their ability based on the information that they have available to them. So again, please make sure that you utilize your staff people. They are a great resource for you as you're trying to make these important policy decisions. So again, when we talked about you guys as a board being visionaries and looking at things longer term, it is your staff, the administrator, your department heads. They really implement these policies. They have to look at things on the shorter term. They have to look at things with regard to day-to-day operations. So they tend to look at the minutia. They have to know that, pay attention to the detail, and sometimes that requires specialized training, where again, you guys are looking at these making broad policy decisions. So this is a slide that sometimes gets us in trouble when we talk about it. So when you guys hire staff, what are you guys looking for when you hire staff as a county? Anyone? We'll make this interactive again. What do you look for? Do you look for somebody that might have some experience doing the job? They've done it before. They may be credentialed appropriately for that particular position, have the education that is needed. They may be, for example, involved and engaged in their local organizations or professional associations, right? If you're hiring a lawyer, you want to make sure they're continuing to get all their CLE credits, right? All of that type of stuff. Now, what were your qualifications to get elected to the County Board of Supervisors? You guys know?
20 signatures.
You had to get some signatures.
Get more people to check your name.
Yeah. Do you know by statute? Breathing? I have to say, every place I go, it's always, we're breathing. All right. That is a common answer. Okay. So by statute, you have to be 18, right? You have to be 18. You have to live in your district. And you have to be eligible to serve for office, which basically means you can't be a felon. All right? So think about those qualifications and think about what we just talked about for staff, right? Now, that is not at all to say that county board members aren't well educated, but you guys have to have your pulse really on what is happening within your local community. You have to understand what the needs are. You guys have to be able to go out and talk to the public and find out, hey, what's going on? What can we do for you as a county, right? It's a very different type of position than, say, the role that your staff serves. Again, so when we talk about this and we talk about policy versus administration, as the board, you may ask the question, why are we going to do this? What is it that we should be doing as a county? Once you make that policy decision, then the staff and the administration say, okay, how are we going to make this happen? Where are we going to do it? And when can we get it done by? So again, the questions that you ask yourselves, board versus administration, are very different. All right. I think we already talked a little bit about department heads and the leadership role that the department heads play within their particular departments, but they do so also within the guidelines and the policies and procedures that are set by the county board. So for example, I'm sure your county board has adopted a personnel policy, for example, and it is the role of your department heads to make sure that those personnel policies adopted by the board are being implemented. All right, this one. Individual county board supervisors have no management or leadership role outside of committees and commissions. Their authority is collective as a member of the board. One county board actually has pared this down in their county board rules to just a few words. And it just says, do not micromanage departments. Okay? This is the nicer way of saying that, but it actually is in a county board rule where it says you do not micromanage departments. Oh, well, here, Councilor Phillips.
Good morning. Sorry for being late.
That's okay. Andy, can you see the slide we're on?
I certainly can. That's perfect. I had a contested county board chair election to deal with that went a lot longer than I thought it was going to go, so I apologize.
That's right. Well, since you are the lawyer, Andy, do you want to talk about this one?
I'd love to. And I assume, Sarah, that you have reviewed the difficulty that we have in trying to distinguish between the policymaking branch of county government and the administrative or executive branch, and the lack of clarity that we have in Chapter 59 of the statutes, and how that lack of clarity is different than state government or federal government where we have the different articles of the Constitution that define those roles. And so we have over the years seen disputes surrounding, well, whose decision is it and when does that person have the authority to make the decision? Thankfully, we've only had a couple of cases that have made their way up to the Court of Appeals level that have defined the distinction between policy and administration in county government. So we don't have a lot of litigation over this, but we have had litigation in this Schutte versus Vanderhay case from 1996 as an example. That was the first case to deal with the question of who gets to make this decision. Is it county executive decision or is it going to be the county board's decision? And in the course of resolving that dispute, of course, the court had to look at, is this a policy decision or is this an executive or administrative decision? In reaching the conclusion, the Attorney General went through a process, the court went through a process of analyzing all different sources as it relates to defining what it is that the statutes mean. And first, the court relied upon an Attorney General opinion from 1991, recognizing, I think what all of us recognize, that the county board's function is primarily policymaking and legislative, while the county executive or county administrator, in St. Croix County's case, functions as an administrator and manager. Turning to the dictionary, the court took a look and said policy is defined as a high-level overall plan embracing the general goals and acceptable procedures, especially of a governmental body. And then turning to the leading treatise on municipal entities, leading treatise throughout the country, that's McQuillan, it quoted from that treatise, legislative power, as distinguished from executive power, is the authority to make laws or policy, but not to enforce those laws or that policy, or to appoint the agents charged with the duty of enforcement. The crucial test for determining whether something is legislative or policymaking and what's administrative has been said to be whether the ordinance or policy is one making a new law or policy, or one executing a law or policy already in existence. And so even though we don't have the clear delineation that we might have in the United States Constitution between the branches of county government, we still have an overall recognition that that division between policymaking and executive or administrative is baked into Chapter 59 of the statutes. And so I want to spend a brief moment talking about the Schutte versus Vanderhay case and the question that was before the court, because I think that's instructive and interesting as well. And that is the question of whether the farmland surrounding the Outagamie County Airport should be leased. Should that be rented out to somebody who is going to put that land to agricultural use? Now, the FAA said that there's no issue from a safety perspective with leasing out that property, but the Outagamie County executive said, you know what? No, we're not going to lease that property surrounding the airport. I don't think that it's appropriate to lease that property for a variety of reasons, especially for the safety of people who utilize the airport. The county board said, forget it. The safety issue, that's a red herring. We're not concerned with safety at all. We need to lease that land. And so the question is, who owns that decision? Whether the initial decision, are we going to lease out that property? Is it the county board or the county executive? And I guess, Sarah, I'll ask you to ask for a show of hands. How many people think that it was the county executive's decision? And then how many people think it was the county board's? How many do we have, Sarah, that think it was the executives?
Okay, who thinks it's the executives? All right, many of board members are raising their hands here, Andy.
All right, how many think it was a county board decision? Do we have other hands raised?
Yes, we do. About half.
All right, so we've got a split on the county board as to whether we think it's an executive or a board decision. So who won the case? County board. That's a county board decision. The decision on whether to lease that property is a county board decision. Now, it's a bit of a hollow victory because guess who negotiates that lease? The county executive. And so what we have is a circumstance where the court definitely made a decision about who gets to make that decision, but just like so many other circumstances that we've got with county government, we've got conflict baked into the statutes. In other words, we have to figure out a way to get along in order to achieve what it is that we want to achieve as county government. So that's the discussion of Schutte versus Vanderhay. Sarah, do you want me to just sign off again now? Is that good?
No. I'm going to say, though, I can tell you didn't grow up in the Fox Valley. Because if you did,
Why?
you'd be saying Vanderhay versus Vanderhay.
Are you serious? I'm sorry. I thought it was Vanderhay. I hear I've been pronouncing it wrong my entire life.
Everybody pronounces it. There's somebody else here who's nodding and agreeing with me. I grew up in that area, so yep.
My apologies to the Vanda High family then.
I'm sure Ron I'm sure Ron is questioning that right now. Yes. So, go ahead, Andy.
What I was going to say is that following from this discussion of roles and responsibilities, we know what can happen if we don't have a clear understanding of roles and responsibilities, if we blur the distinction between the policy-making function of the board and the administrative function of your county administrator, department heads, and staff. We spend a lot of time on trivial things. We read reams of documents. We have long-running meetings that accomplish very little. We have committee meetings that just do the bidding of staff. We have meddling in administration. We have administration meddling in policy decisions. But really, the highlight for me is what we've highlighted in red on this slide. We begin to be we begin to be reactive instead of proactive. And so earlier, I think Sarah probably said it ought to be our aspiration to be considered as county board members as visionaries. Well, visionaries are proactive. They establish a framework for resolution of issues prior to those issues ever happening. If we are reactive, we are solving issues on a case-by-case basis, which requires an awful lot of time, and we don't have any consistency in how we're going to deal with things. And so we ought to aspire to be proactive in our approach to the process of resolving some of these issues and these problems. Now, the way that we can be proactive is, and I'll say this a million times, I'm sure, is that we have a clear understanding of roles and responsibilities within county government. If we can get rid of the debate about whose decision is it and really focus on the really important stuff that we have to deal with from a county government standpoint, then we are going to find ourselves a lot more efficient and a lot more able to achieve success. Would you like me to continue, Sarah?
Yes, you can do the rest of this, Andy.
So if we look at the organizational chart for counties with a county executive, there is an issue in that we have an arrow in orange where the county executive is responsible to the electorate, but the county executive is also responsible for carrying out policy direction that the county board establishes. But if the county board is not satisfied with the job that the county executive is doing, what's the recourse? There really isn't any recourse for the county board. The county executive can be removed from office through recall or by the governor for cause. And so the county board has no supervisory authority over the county executive and has no supervisory authority over department heads and county staff. That's a county executive function. This isn't a criticism necessarily of the county executive form, because of course we have that form with state government, with the governor and the legislature. And again, that seems to work. But in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, and I think Sarah shares this opinion, it's not necessarily what a county has to do, but I think it is the most efficient and best form of county government. That's the county administrator form of government. You've got Mr. Witt, who is the county board's sole employee. Mr. Witt is appointed based solely upon merit, based upon his credentials, if you will. And as soon as the county board is unsatisfied with Mr. Witt's job, the job that he's doing, they have the opportunity to remove him as the county administrator. So the county administrator is responsible to the policy-making body within county government. That's the county board. Then the county administrator is responsible for department head and county staff performance. And you'll note that there are no arrows that go from department head or county staff back up to committees or county board. That's not to mean that there's no interaction, because remember, the second role of administration and staff is to provide professional advice and recommendations to allow the board to make an informed policy decision. So there is interaction between county board committees and department heads and staff. But when we look at the organizational chart, the county administrator is responsible for all department heads and county staff. This is a very clean organizational chart. If you look at the organizational chart for administrative coordinator, and different counties with administrative coordinators do it different ways, but that's where we see a blurring of the distinction between the policy-making function of county boards and an operational oversight or administrative function of certain jurisdictional or oversight committees of that county board. We have department heads that report directly to committees, and so they answer to the committees not only on policy issues, but also on administration or operation issues. And so we see a blurring of the distinction between policy and administration in counties with an administrative coordinator. Again, doesn't mean it's never going to work, doesn't mean that it doesn't function well. It just means that there is opportunity for disagreement as it relates to the role of the administrative branch within county government. The administrator form is a bit cleaner as it relates to the org chart. So then the question goes, well, where do constitutional officers fall in the organizational chart? And if we look at the role of constitutional officers within county government, we see that we've got the clerk of courts, register of deeds, treasurer, sheriff, and clerk that are elected county-wide by the citizens of St. Croix County. And so they're responsible to the electorate, but they also have a role in overseeing the operations within their particular department within county government. So do they have some sort of reporting relationship with the county board or the county administrator? And the answer is kind of. And the reason it's kind of is because I like to think, and Sarah likes to think, of the constitutional officer serving as a dual persona. They answer to the electorate as it relates to their constitutional or statutory function, but they also answer to the county executive or the county administrator as it relates to financial or policy decisions that are not within the scope of their statutory or constitutional authority. Let me give you an example. We have a sheriff. That sheriff has a constitutional and statutory obligation to enforce the laws of the state of Wisconsin and the laws of St. Croix County as he sees fit. Period. Full stop. That's the sheriff's prerogative. Now, when it comes to the sheriff's office budget, and when it comes to how many personnel is the sheriff going to have to enforce those laws, how many squad cars is the sheriff going to have to put out on patrol? That all depends upon the money appropriated through the county budget process. And the sheriff has no independent authority as it relates to budget or finance. And so that's where the sheriff has to work with the county board and county administration in the administration of financial affairs associated with the sheriff's office. Likewise, when it comes to personnel issues, the sheriff does not have 100% discretion over people that work in the sheriff's office. The personnel regulations are controlled by the county board by statute. And so it sets up, in many ways, this conflict where the sheriff is going to say, I have the constitutional and statutory authority to enforce the laws as I see fit. And the county board says that's true, but you can only do so within the means that we provide you vis-a-vis the county budget. And so again, another situation where we've got conflict baked into the statutes, which tells us that we ought to do our jobs on both sides in understanding roles and responsibilities. And so we ought to have a lot of discussions with the sheriff about how the sheriff is going to do his job. We ought to have a lot of discussions with the clerk, the treasurer, the register of deeds, and so on, about how it is that they are going to do their jobs and what we need to do as a county board in order to provide them with adequate resources to carry out their constitutional or statutory function. That doesn't mean that we're always going to agree, but it means that we ought to have a discussion about what it is that is necessary to meet the needs of the citizens of St. Croix County. And Sarah, you want to take the next slide?
Sure, I guess I can. All right. So a lot of what we've been talking about today is really about how we achieve harmony at the county level. You know, harmony between board members and administration, board members and constitutional officers, members of the, administration and constitutional officers. So really what we're talking about here is how everybody can really work together. And that is our ultimate goal, is to make sure everybody works together for the betterment of all the citizens in St. Croix County. So again, when we talk about how do we ensure things can run smoothly, we need to make sure that everybody knows their jobs and trying not to interfere in that of administration. Again, your role as a policymaker versus the role of administration. We talk about devoting the time needed to do a good job, making sure that you read the background materials and that you're prepared for your meetings. I can't tell you how many times, at least I've noted this with other boards I have sat on, where, before everything was sent electronically, do you ever get to a meeting and somebody for the first time is opening up that envelope while they're sitting at the meeting? Now, how effective of a member of that board can they be if they have not done their homework and read their meeting materials ahead of time. We also talk about admitting what you don't know. It is impossible for you as a county board member to know every detail about every single service that county government provides. It is an absolute impossibility. Andy and I have been around for a long time, over 30 years. And I can tell you, we are still learning new things every day. And you will continue to learn new things every day as a member of the county board. It is okay to ask questions. It is okay to say and to admit, hey, I don't know this. Department head, can you please help me? Can you please explain this to me? Also make sure that we don't jump to conclusions. Instead, we weigh all the facts.
Let me ask this, Sarah. How many new county board members do we have in St. Croix County?
One.
We have one new. Oh, that's awesome. So we're going to put all the important stuff on that one new supervisor relating to human services, for example. I think it's impossible. It's impossible to try to figure out the complexities associated with delivery of human services without relying upon the professional advice of staff. And so I think part of the challenge we have is that we were elected as county board supervisors to sit in a seat and respond to the demands and needs of our electorate, the people who put us in that seat. At the same time, it's very difficult to say, well, I don't necessarily know exactly what I'm supposed to do here because I was elected and I should know what I'm doing. It's okay to admit that you don't know everything. That's why we have staff. That's why we have corporation counsel, we have administrator, we have human services director, we have highway commissioner. Go down the list of our department heads. Those people are incredibly talented professionals who have spent their entire lives crafting a career. And so let's rely on them. And it's okay to admit that we don't know everything. I just want to make that absolutely clear. And there's no such thing as a dumb question or a stupid question, because the ultimate goal here is to provide the county board with the opportunity to make an informed policy decision. You can't make an informed decision if you don't have the background, you don't have the facts, and you don't have a recommendation from staff. So be very, very liberal in your ability to ask questions and ask for advice and recommendation from staff.
And I hope
I'll continue on this one, Sarah. Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
And so we don't want to make promises to people because you know what? We don't know everything. And until we get to a board meeting or a committee meeting to listen to the different facts and circumstances that weigh into the decision that we are about to make, we can't make promises outside of meetings because who knows if we'll be able to hold up that promise. So avoid the temptation to make promises outside of board or committee meetings. As I mentioned just a minute ago, listen to our constitutional officers, listen to our staff, let them know that you're listening. That's important to them. There's nothing more frustrating. I can speak as a lawyer. There's nothing more frustrating, for example, than getting to court and knowing that the judge is not going to listen to me or the judge is not going to read what I've submitted. That's incredibly frustrating. Let's avoid that frustration. Let's listen to what staff has to say. And there's no obligation that we agree with it, but at least give them the benefit of hearing what it is that they're trying to say. And so if somebody complains to us, whether it be constituents, another employee within county government, we can listen, but we don't try to solve problems that are outside of our authority. We have no ability individually as county board supervisors to solve some of these issues. What we ought to be is really, really good shepherds. We ought to direct them to the people that can solve those problems, that can answer those questions. That's good constituent service, all right? So we want to have an awesome Rolodex. For those of you who are old enough to know what a Rolodex is, we ought to have an awesome Rolodex right by our phone so that when we get that call, we know exactly where we're going to go with issues. And if you have a question as a county board supervisor about where something needs to go or how to address an issue, call Mr. Witt, call your administrator, because your administrator is going to have a good idea about where to go. And it's his job to make sure that these issues are resolved in a timely fashion. Staff has an obligation to be politically neutral. They don't take a position based upon politics. Now, I'm not talking about R&D politics here. What I'm talking about are positional politics that are identified by the factions that develop on a board from time to time. Staff has an obligation to remain politically neutral. So I would really avoid, really try to avoid painting staff with a particular political brush as being in support of or opposed to any sort of positional interest on the county board. They have an obligation to be politically neutral, address the pros and cons associated with the decision, then offer a recommendation. And that recommendation is just that, it's a recommendation. It doesn't mean that staff isn't going to carry out the policy direction established by the board if it's contrary to recommendation. It just means that that's their recommendation, all right? So they're going to be politically neutral, understanding the various factions that exist on the board and offering advice and recommendations based upon their understanding of the various factions that may exist with respect to particular issues. Let's not assume staff is taking sides simply because they're offering a recommendation. So we have some takeaways, and the takeaways as we go through this process, number one, and I want to emphasize this point, is that it is impossible for Sarah, me, or both of us to go through everything that is involved with being a county board member in a half hour to an hour during the organizational meeting. Understand that getting a sound foundational knowledge of roles and responsibilities is an iterative or ongoing process. And so if you ever want to continue this discussion, there are plenty of opportunities to continue it, whether it be at the WCA's annual conference in September every year, at the various trainings that are held throughout the state, heck, in one-on-one conversations with your board, if you find yourself divided or upset or in disagreement about a particular issue, call Sarah, call me, and we're happy to have further discussions with the board. So that's the number one takeaway. But then other key points to remember here. Counties are creatures of the state. Unlike municipal government, we don't have constitutional home rule authority. If the legislature tells us to do something, we have to do it. We may disagree vehemently, but once the legislature speaks, we don't have discretion as counties not to follow what the legislature has demanded. County boards and county board members serve as a legislative body and legislators within county government. That means that county boards establish policy. We approve budgets, which are also policy documents, and we make decisions as a body. In other words, cooperatively. We don't have operational control sitting with any particular member of the county board. County boards work most effectively when we have a strong committee system that serve as a vetting procedure before policy initiatives get to the county board. All of the roll up your sleeves, heavy lifting type work gets done at the committee level. That's where we should get input from the community that is going to be impacted by a policy decision. That's where we really go through the art of fine-tuning resolutions before they hit the county board floor, because the county board ought to have confidence that the committees have done that difficult work at the committee level before a resolution ever sees the light of day before the county board. Again, individual supervisors have no individual operational or management role outside of the leadership role they have over a legislative body if they're the county board chair, or a committee if they're a committee chair. Administration and department heads have to. They don't have a choice. They have to implement the policies and procedures that the board establishes. Micromanaging at any level stifles productivity. And so we have to recognize where micromanagement occurs. What is micromanagement? What is not micromanagement? Have those discussions. When we have a board and an administrator and an administrative team with the department heads working cohesively and cooperatively in unison to achieve the policy directive established by the board, that's where we have the best chance of success in meeting the demands and the needs that our county residents expect us to meet. There are additional resources. I said that was takeaway number one. Understand those additional resources that are at your disposal. We have extension. We have me through Atola's Law. We have Sarah and WCA. Obviously, we work hand in glove. We work a lot together to provide information and insight to counties. Understand, too, I've never sat in the seat of a county board member. Sarah's never sat in that seat. That's why you all get the big bucks, is to make those decisions, all right? So we can't speak to exactly what you need to do. All we can do is offer perspective based upon our years of experience throughout the state and working with counties. And so, again, if you ever want to have a discussion about particular issues that are confronting St. Croix County, we'd be happy to continue that discussion. And I'll let you wrap it up, Sarah.
All right. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions? Well, I thought this presentation was fabulous, and thank you so much, Sarah, for actually being here in person. These are great reminders of our roles as policymakers, not micromanaging, and sometimes we want to get our fingers in there, but we have to pull back. So thank you so much. Will this presentation be available to us?
I think Ken already has a copy of it.
Oh, Ken already has
I
it.
think
All
it's
right.
in your,
Well,
I
good
think
deal.
it's in your meeting packets, so.
Okay, good deal. All right, any any other questions, comments? I think we're going to have a nice break, have a little early lunch, give us a chance to get up and walk around a little bit, which I really need. So thank you again for your presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank every member of the board for doing what they do, because on behalf of me, who works for county, Sarah who works for county, you guys are doing this for the love of St. Croix County, and we certainly appreciate everything that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Let's take a quick 15 minutes, and we'll reconvene and hear from our department heads. Okay, we're going to get back on track here and get started. We're going to review standing committees with department head introductions. So I'm going to turn that over to Administrator Witt to get us started on that.
Thank you, Chairman Long. So we're going to go through the different departments. We're going to start with public protection. Carl, if you want to get on deck there. So what we're doing is we're asking the department heads not to go through what the department does, but to just talk about any items that they would bring to the committees as you're still making selections for what committees you're interested in, and as the county board chair is going to appoint you to different committees. You can hear that and lend to your preference for what committees you might end up on. So Carl, why don't you kick us off with public protection and what things you might bring before the Public Protection Committee?
So the big thing for the DA's office for the public protection, I think going forward in the relatively near future, will be implementing our investigative position that was approved by the referendum. We won't have to start completely from scratch because it's pretty common in counties our size and larger to have investigators. La Crosse has one, I think Eau Claire has one, but it's a totally new position for our office, so I think we'll have to talk about policies and how we're going to structure that. So I think that'll be the big thing for our office going forward. Other than that, it's pretty business as usual.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
All right, come on up. The rest of the public protection reporting committees. Rebecca, Lisa, Brent, Kate.
Patty Schochner, Chief Medical Examiner here. I think the biggest obstacle that people are going to have on public protection is understanding the aging out of the baby boomer population. Our seen deaths have increased by 50% in 1 year. They are much more complicated, much more costly, and we see this is really overtaking everything that we're working with. Lots of accidental deaths, but it's really our aging population. We are really seeing a lot of loneliness and isolation out there. So what we see trickles down to all the other departments. So really the biggest thing is going to be isolation, and I project that the rate of scenes are going to continue to increase, which means everything that we do is going to increase our budget. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Patty.
Hi, good afternoon. Brent Standard. I'm the Chief Deputy. The Sheriff is at a conference today and extends his welcome to the County Board. So a few of the things that our department brings to this committee is one that's really important for the Public Protection Committee is that you're charged with inspecting the jail every year, which we think is a really major oversight that's important for the county. Some of the resolutions that we bring to the county are the fees that we charge back for Huber inmates or other counties for doing some contract work for patrol for them. And a few of the other things we have coming up is there's a KIP item coming up in for a jail expansion in a few years. So we like to give a lot of insight and rationale behind why we're asking for that. So those are a few of the things that we bring to the committee. So thank you.
Good morning and welcome to the new board, all of you. Appreciate all your assistance and knowledge. I'm Lisa Plunkett from the Child Support Office. I'm the administrator, and a lot of the information that I bring to the Public Protection Committee is just updates. We do have a WINS grant, which is Wisconsin's Network for Safety, to develop a protocol for domestic violence victims and provide safety for them through the process of establishing child support. So that would be the most knowledgeable update that I would provide, but I also provide updates as I get requests to. If you want a department update, I would provide that to you. I'd also bring forward any accomplishments or any other things that is brought from the state down to the Child Support Agency that is something new that I think you should know about. Other than that, I'm here for any questions, and please visit our office if you want. Thanks.
Good afternoon and welcome to the board. My name is Rebecca Rowan. I'm the Register in Probate, and I am not an elected official. I was appointed by the judges, so I work at their direction. I don't bring things to the committee, but I wanted to come up and speak on behalf of Christy Severson. She's the elected official. She's the clerk of court. She's in a meeting with the judges right now, which is why she's not here. A lot of things that she would bring to the committee are staffing issues. There have been some retention problems that began in the pandemic, and I know they still have an open position, and the recent referendum added a position to the clerk of courts as well. So I'm sure that you'll hear from her as she works to solve those issues. Welcome, and thanks again.
Hello, I am Kate Brewer. I'm with Justice Support Services Department. Phil Golly right now is at training in St. Louis. So in our department, we have treatment court, which is me. We have pretrial downstairs, and we also do the CJCC. Some things that we will bring to our committees are fee schedules that we've changed, any policy and procedures that we like to see changed with all that, and just any difficulties we're having working with partnerships.
Question for you. We are still okay with treatment court is on Wednesday mornings, correct?
Treatment court is on Wednesday mornings at 8:30.
And any of you supervisors, if you would like to sit in on some of those, I spend my time up there, as Kate knows very well, but it's amazing to see the progress that a lot of these folks are making all the way through there. So if you've got 45 minutes to an hour on a Wednesday morning and they start at 8:30, please stop in and just see what's going on up there.
And we really thank you for your support. I've seen half of you probably in our treatment court and our graduations. All of our participants love it. So, thanks.
All right, so that wraps up the Public Protection and Judiciary Committee. The next committee then is the Administration Committee. I see them lined up on the back row, right side. So why don't you guys come on up and talk about administration.
Audrey Haycraft, HR Director. Most of my agenda items are related to employment or wage classifications or changes. So when we do full wage grid analysis and make changes to that, position reclassifications or regrades, if we have requests for new positions or additional FTE, kind of anything that impacts the overall budget, special compensation adjustments. So if we needed to add hiring bonuses or shift differentials, call-in pays, things like that. And then typically once a year, we also do plan design changes to the health insurance plan that always go through the admin committee as well. And that should do it.
I'm John Allegro. I'm the IT director, and I typically only bring budget items to the committee, but they're periodically, every 4 to 7 years, we might have a personnel request coming through too, and that's about it.
Good afternoon, Taylor Mabus, Facilities Director. Really, the only thing I'd bring up is anything facilities related, building projects, additions. That's about it.
Denise Anderson, I'm the county treasurer. The only thing that I would typically bring to the admin committee would be tax deed properties. So my office, the county treasurer, takes properties for unpaid taxes, and then together the county clerk, corp counsel, and myself make up the tax deed committee. And the county clerk sells those properties, and then those come for approval to the admin committee.
All right, I would just add then for the administration committee, it's the committee that is the catch-all. So if it's not specifically designated to another committee, it'll go to the administration committee. Everything comes from a committee to the county board. But really the general things are the budget, capital improvement planning, any insurances, union contract negotiations, sale or use of county property. But again, anything that's not designated elsewhere would go to administration. All right. Next, we'll go to the Highway Committee, and Robbie's online for that. There's Robbie.
my apologies for not being there in person. I appreciate the opportunity and thank you guys for serving. At Highway, you're going to typically see updates that range from federal and Wisconsin Department of Transportation policy updates to ensure that our county has policies that meet or follow those guidelines to ensure that we're covered. As far as simple policies, as much as what happens to a citizen's mailbox when snow discharged from a snowplow knocks it off its post, to more complex issues like jurisdictional agreements between counties and cities and villages within our county, as well as modifications to the county highway system. So you will deal with a lot of different topics, and we try to keep you updated on what's going on around the county.
Thank you, Robbie. All right, next we'll have Health and Human Services. Bob's got a long list of things.
I know. I had a presentation, but I won't do it. Welcome, Supervisor Rice, and welcome back, all other supervisors. My name is Bob Rarrett. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services. I was going to talk just briefly, Ken, about the structure and the responsibilities of the HHS committee. The HHS board is made up of 6 board supervisors. We know who they are now, so Supervisors Lind, Anderson, Leaf, Osnes, Telejohn, and Markelo. And then we have 3 community members, Julie Smith, who's an RN, Deb Lindeman, who's an RN, and a former health officer for St. Croix County, and we have Dr. Kathleen Finley from Western Wisconsin Health on our HHS board, so 9 members. Typically, I create a draft agenda and then meet with the board chair prior to the meetings to come up with agenda items, and the board chair, of course, can amend those or add to it. We follow Robert's Rules of Order, you know all that. Typically, the responsibilities of the HHS committee focus on things like reviewing our monthly financial reports, which are done at every meeting, giving input on those. Typically, well, actually every year, typically in June, we have public comment or public input on our budget planning process. So at our HHS board, again, since I've been here anyway, in June, we have an open invitation for the public to come and speak to our services and budgeting for the budget priorities for the following year. And then the HHS committee also reviews and provides feedback on our annual budget for the department that we take into consideration with the county administrator when making budget decisions. Some of the other responsibilities that go along with the HHS committee consist of, as you've heard and know, providing policy direction for the department. The HHS committee acts as the local board of health under statute 251.03. And the committee may recommend resolutions, ordinances, or other items for consideration by the county board. I listed just a few recent examples of that: a resolution to accept 2 vehicles for ADRC, resolution outlining a response to health hazards, things like that, and sometimes rate adjustments when we have to look at our rates and adjust them based on inflation and other factors. The Council on Aging and Disabilities, or COAD, reports to the HHS committee. Supervisor Leaf and Supervisor Adams and Supervisor Osnes served on that council. The role of the COAD is to identify the needs of seniors and adults with disabilities and to recommend services that meet those needs. And I think that is all I had.
Supervisor Osnes?
Bob, you want to talk just a little bit about the symposium that's coming up?
Oh, I can mention that we're having our 3rd annual mental health symposium on May 1st at St. Croix Central High School in Hammond. That'll be from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. If you go to the website, you can see the agenda and some other details about that symposium. You're all, of course, welcome to come. It's free of charge.
All right, thank you, Bob. Yep. All right, and last committee then, community development. Jason, she's it.
last but not least, hopefully. So, very good to be here. Glad to see everybody pretty much back. Welcome to the board. In community development, we do a lot of what Sarah was talking about earlier. We do a lot of long-range planning. We just wrapped up the county comprehensive plan. We've also got a bike and pedestrian plan that we work on. We have a lot of master plans for our parks. We've got a general county outdoor rec plan that we do. In the next year, there will be probably a lot of land use policy updates that are going to be guiding documents for our staff. And then the Community Development Committee also serves as the Land and Water Committee for our water quality programming and conservation efforts within the county. And besides all of the normal, just general oversight budgetary items. Okay.
All right, great, thank you. So that was a brief introduction. You know, this is a veteran crowd. So, I mean, you guys knew most of this. Otherwise, we'd probably go into a little bit more detail. You can go get ready. But we just wanted to give you that brief reminder of the types of different things that you see at committees. So if you're not seeing something, let us know. But Heather's going to take off now with her presentation on Robert's Rules of Order and other fun things that county boards do. I don't know if that's the official title, Heather.
Yeah, that's what it is. All right. Well, I'm sorry you have to listen to me a lot now in the next hour and a half. So we are going to talk about Robert's Rules of Order and running effective meetings. And so this is a veteran crowd. I'm going to go through some things quickly, but I want to focus on some things that we maybe didn't do exactly correct in the last 2 years, and we will do it correct going forward. So the objective of the rules is to facilitate the smooth functioning of the governmental body and provide a firm basis for resolving questions of procedure that may arise. Many of you know we follow Robert's Rules of Order, and we also have the rules governing the Board of Supervisors. So specifically Article 3, Section D of the rules set forth procedures of how meetings should be run. And then Robert's Rules of Order governs all rules that are not specifically indicated in the rules of the Board of Supervisors. So there are some things that cannot be superseded by statute, which Sarah explained somewhat, that counties are, an arm of the state, and therefore we have to follow statutes. So we have to comply with open meetings law, which will be another presentation I will give at the end of the day. There's also some voting requirements that are required that we can't change at the local level. So supermajority votes are 2/3 of entire membership for budget amendments and 3/4 of entire membership for issuance of debt. Okay, so these are the things that everyone should follow during county board meetings. First, board chair should not be referred to by his name. You should refer to him as Chair Long. The chair should speak of himself or herself in the third person. And also, if you're mentioning another county board supervisor, you should do that as Supervisor Barkalow, Supervisor Van Summeren. You should use their last name and not say Bob or Sean. Supervisors should not speak without first having addressed the board chair and obtained the floor. And you have not obtained the floor to speak until the chair has recognized you to do so. Make sure to address all of the remarks through the board chair. So don't speak to the body, the gallery, the cameras, people in the audience. And supervisors should also not address one another directly. So an example of this would be if a supervisor comments and another supervisor has a disagreement, direct your comment to board chair. You can indicate, I disagree with Supervisor Smith, and these are the reasons why, but you shouldn't directly, make that comment to the other supervisor. Okay, so duties of the chair. So all persons at a meeting have an obligation to obey the chair. The board chair shall enforce the rules relating to debate, order, and decorum. And the board chair shall remind supervisors to confine remarks to the merits of the agenda item. And I think we can all say sometimes we get a little bit off of agenda items, and so the board chair's responsibility is to make sure people get back on the agenda if we stray. Okay, so debating the question. So supervisors' remarks to a motion or a question must be germane to the agenda item or the motion before the county board, and must maintain a courteous tone, should avoid interjecting a personal tone into the debate. You can obviously let your personal experiences in life might create what you're going to say, but just make sure you're not personalizing the debate. The board chair should relinquish the chair position if entering the debate and not return until the motion or the question is disposed of. This is for the county board meetings. At the committee levels or the HHS board or other council meetings, the chair of those standing committees or boards can engage in debate. So that's a different rule for the county board versus the committees. So how business is brought before the county board or a committee, it's through a motion by a supervisor. And so a motion is a formal proposal to take action. And the only item that brings business before the county board is the main motion. And so that little sheet that Sarah pointed out, that is a very helpful sheet. I actually bring it to all the county board meetings. And it indicates which motions are primary, which are secondary, what is debatable, what's not debatable, and how much, usually majority of supervisors are the voting requirements. But it sets forth all the different voting requirements on that sheet. So a supervisor must first obtain the floor when making a motion, when no other question is pending, and when business of the kind represented by the motion is in order, meaning that item is up on the agenda. So a supervisor must obtain the floor before making the motion, and the motion is not before the body until restated by the board chair. Now, this is a requirement set forth in Robert's Rules of Order. We don't always do this, but it's helpful. Sometimes there's questions like, what are we actually voting on? And so it's helpful if the board chair can restate the motion.
Can we also be a little bit more diligent this next 2 years? And I'd ask the chair to do this as well. So moved is not a motion. Because I don't necessarily remember what one of the two people that were speaking said. So if you could speak to that, maybe for Supervisor Rice as well.
Yes. So it is, the Robert's Rules of Order indicate that you should restate the motion. So if the motion is, I make a motion to approve the resolution regarding XYZ, and it's been seconded, there's debate. Before the motion is voted on, the board chair should say, reminder, this is a motion to approve the resolution for XYZ. And so then everybody knows what they're doing, approving or not approving, and it's just helpful if that is restated by the board chair. And the motion also may be prefaced by a few words of explanation. Sometimes that's required. I think our practice here is typically the chair indicates that there's an agenda item, somebody makes a motion to approve, seconded, and then the discussion is where that explanation comes in. But the rules do allow a few words of explanation regarding the agenda item or the motion you're making. Board chair may assist a supervisor in framing the motion. And this is key, and this came up in the last couple months. The maker of the motion may not withdraw the motion once stated by the board chair, as the motion is now the property of the body. So there's no friendly motions or friendly amendments. Once it's with the board and the body has it, you can't change it unless you make a motion to amend. So you can't say, I withdraw my motion, because now it's not needed anymore. That's not allowed. You have to vote on it. Discussion on an issue is permitted only with reference to a pending motion. And again, until a matter is brought before the county board in the form of a motion, it cannot be debated. And this is not true for small boards or committees. So as most of you know, at the standing committees or HHS board, you can have all the discussion you want on an agenda item, and then at the end, somebody makes a motion to approve the resolution or the ordinance. You don't have to have the motion first in small committees and boards. But at the county board, we do have to have that motion and that second first before the discussion can be held. The maker of a motion may vote against it, but may not speak against their own motion. So if you make a motion to approve something, you can't then say, 2 minutes later, actually don't vote for this item. If you make the motion, you can vote against it, but you can't speak against your own motion. A supervisor who makes a motion is entitled to be recognized first, and no one is entitled to the floor a second time if a supervisor who has not spoken desires the floor. So I just ask to be cognizant about those other people that have had their hand raised. If you've already spoken once, just maybe let them raise their hand and be called on first before you speak a second time. Okay, so if you want to end the debate, you don't say, call the question. The proper way is to make a motion to close the debate, which a second is required and a 2/3 vote is then required. So it's more than a majority, it's 2/3 vote. So if a debate's going on for 2 hours and If you think we've had enough, someone can make a motion to close the debate, and that's how it would end. Let's hope we don't have debates that are 2 hours. If you want to postpone or table an issue, I recommend using a motion to postpone, but both are allowed by Robert's Rules of Order. So a motion to table is utilized to set aside a matter without designating when to take up the issue again, which is different than a motion to postpone indefinitely. A motion to postpone indefinitely is to kills the motion, kills the item. Motion to table is utilized oftentimes if supervisors need additional information or there's other matters that need more attention. Oftentimes, if supervisors need additional attention or information at the county board level, the proper motion is to make a motion to send the item or the agenda item back to the standing committee, because that's really where you could gather more information. But it also can be tabled. A motion to postpone to a date certain, then you need to make sure when you make your motion, I motion to postpone this to the county board meeting scheduled for May. It has to be the date that you want it to in your motion. And again, motion to postpone indefinitely, it's to set aside the agenda item with no intention to take it up again. Okay, when there's a point of order, that's when a supervisor believes something incorrect is happening. So there's no second or debate on a point of order. The board chair rules on the points of order. If you think that something is incorrectly happening, but you don't bring it up until 2 agenda items later, you have waived your right to make a point of order. So you need to make sure you make the point of order at the time the issue is happening. But it's not waived, however, if the action violates law or a fundamental procedure in the rules governing the Board of Supervisors. So if a supervisor believes the board chair ruled incorrectly on their point of order, any supervisor may make a motion to appeal that decision. If you make a motion to appeal the chair's decision on the point of order, there is a second, and that motion is debatable. It takes precedence over the underlying motion, and the board chair can concede the issue before a vote is taken. If he or she receives additional information, realizes that maybe their decision was wrong, they can concede the issue before a vote is taken. Okay, so after a motion is made and seconded, an amendment or withdrawal of the motion is only allowed through the entire county board, similar to what I was speaking about before. There's no friendly amendments. It has to be by a formal motion to amend. These are the rules for the standing committee. I touched on them a bit, but supervisors may have discussion on an agenda item without a pending motion. There's no time limits on discussions. Again, though, if you wanted to stop the debate, you can make a motion to end debate. And the standing committee chair can make a motion and participate in the discussion without relinquishing the chair position. Obviously, we have smaller committees, and so if you take one person out of a 5-person committee, that might affect what's discussed, what's brought up, and so that's why standing committee chairs are able to participate in the discussion. So at the end of meetings, typically in this county, our practice is just to say all the agenda items are done, we are adjourning for the day at this time. So it's not necessarily required to make a motion to adjourn, but if someone does make a motion to adjourn, that only requires majority vote. However, if you make a motion not to adjourn, that requires 2/3 vote. I can't think of a time when you would make a motion not to adjourn, because typically you've handled all the business, your agenda items are done. I don't really know what else you would talk about, but that is in the rules. A motion to adjourn can be made at any time except during when a vote is taken. So if you're in the middle of taking a vote and someone wants to make a motion to adjourn because they don't want the vote to be taken, that's not allowed. Okay, any questions regarding Robert's Rules of Order? Supervisor Leaf.
I wanted to mention that meeting minutes don't need a motion to approve. Isn't it just any additions or corrections, they stand approved as read for
Correct.
the standing committees?
Correct, yep. I think in the board it's in the, yes, I can talk a little bit about consent agenda. So on the county board agendas, we have the consent agenda. Typically in the consent agenda are the minutes from the previous meeting, rezoning requests. And so the consent agenda, there's a motion and a second. It's just voted on. There's no discussion on the consent agenda. If someone wants to address something that's within the consent agenda, they would make a request to have item XYZ regarding zoning removed from the consent agenda and placed on the business items, and then it will be discussed that way. sometimes there's confusion on whether or not there needs to be a motion and a second on a consent agenda. I recommend yes, that's how you get it approved. But I've seen other committees that just say, the items are in the consent agenda. Does anybody have any objections? No. Okay, they all are approved. That's not how we do it here. Go ahead.
And to pull an item only requires a supervisor to request.
Correct.
Doesn't require a second on that.
Correct.
And I did have a question.
Go ahead.
So being that we're pushing a little bit more towards more decorum when names are mentioned, I would almost ask that we try not to mention each other's names, because if you have used 2 times, like, can you call for privilege if you've used 2 times to speak according to our rules, and then someone's like, yeah, burning ideas stink or whatever, and then I'm sitting there and now I'm done. Are we allowed to then respond to the chair based on our name being mentioned?
Yes, you are. And again, just to make sure your comments are made to the chair. And again, we're pretty collegial group. As Sarah said, there's other county boards that have a lot of fighting. And I think, if you can refrain from personally attacking someone, that's obviously decorum of the body. But if you want to address, like Supervisor Burning said this, I think actually this is the factual analysis for this issue. And then eventually Supervisor Burning wants to respond to, Supervisor Shirley. I think you can do that in just a respectful way. And obviously, directing your comments to the chair. So, anybody else have questions? Supervisor Ramberg?
Yes, in regard to adjourning, so if the agenda is done, the chair can just call the meeting as adjourned.
Correct.
Is that true with the county board as well?
Correct, yes, for both, yes. Any other questions regarding Robert's Rules of Order?
Just one quick question on my favorite, the amendment upon the amendment upon the amendment.
Yes.
That drives me nuts. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm hugging you.
Well, my blood pressure's been low, not high now lately. So I really want to emphasize to the standing committees that we need to be maybe a little more definitive of what we're trying to ask the entire committee to do, so that there aren't so many questions. There aren't 7 people saying, well, we should do it this way or that way. And sometimes we need to look at taking that back and sending it back to the committee, because we spend an awful lot of time amending to the amendment of the amendment. And that's just my opinion. So thank you very much.
And I'll speak a little bit to that too. When there is a motion and a second made, that's the main motion on the floor, then somebody wants to make a motion to amend and a second. That motion to amend needs to be addressed and voted on before another amendment is made. I think you all can recall a couple months ago where we had amendments upon amendments. You should always vote on the amendment that's on the floor first. And then if someone wants to make another motion to amend something else, then that person makes a motion in the second, and we discuss that amendment. And it does get confusing, as Supervisor Otino indicated, to try to keep track what you're actually voting on. And so that's when it's helpful for the chair to restate what we're voting on and just make sure no one makes a motion to amend until the amendment is already addressed. So, Supervisor Ramberg?
So that's a good point. Thank you. So we can only be 2 deep. Is
Correct.
that the way to say it?
Yes. That's a good way to say it. Now we are going to talk about standing committees and assignment process, unless anybody else has any other questions. Okay, so I'm going to go over the standing committees and how they are populated. So you heard the department head speak about what they bring to the committees, and this is just a quick overview on the designated departments of the committees and how they're populated. So the administration committee, designated departments are corporation counsel, county administrator, county clerk, treasurer, facilities, finance, human resources, and information technology. Community Development Committee is Community Development Department, Register of Deeds, and UW Extension. Health and Human Services Board is the Health and Human Services Department, Healthcare Campus, and Veteran Services. Public Protection and Judiciary, the designated departments are Child Support Agency, Circuit Court, Clerk of Court, District Attorney's Office, Emergency Support Services, Medical Examiner, and the Sheriff's Office. Transportation Committee is Highway Department and County Surveyor. So pursuant to the statutes, the county administrator shall appoint all members of boards subject to confirmation by the county board. And you heard Sarah talk about how there was a case regarding whether or not the county administrator could give that right to the board chair. And he cannot because the statutes indicate shall. And so Mr. Rorit spoke to the HHS board being made up of 9 total members, 6 county board supervisors and 3 citizen members. And each of the other standing committees has 5 county supervisors. These standing committees are appointed by the county board chair, and each supervisor will be appointed to at least 1 standing committee and not more than 2. So today, what we did, the county board elected the chair and the vice chair. Next, the county board, well, it already happened, but the county board would confirm the county administrator's appointments to the HHS board. And then within 5 days of today's date, the chair shall appoint members of the standing committees. So administration, community development, public protection and judiciary, and transportation. Each standing committee shall self-organize. The county board shall designate an appointed member from each of the standing committees to be the convener of the initial meeting. And then at that first meeting, each standing committee will elect its own chair and vice chair. Similar to how we did today, take nominations for chair, vote on it, nominations for vice chair, and vote on it. The convener will conduct the initial meeting with the assistance of the county administrator until the chair is selected. So what you'll see at the first agenda is election of chair. And so once that's done, then the chair will take over and run the rest of the meeting. And that is set forth in Article 4, Section E of the Rules of the Board of Supervisors. Any questions? All right. I think these 2 presentations are done then.
All right. Good news is we're getting to the end. All right. So I'm going to go over strategic planning and budgeting with you guys. This is an abbreviated version of it. When we talk about strategic planning, really I'm looking at it from a high-level perspective. And what I talk to new employees about is our vision and mission statement. You see it on the wall behind me. There's really about 6 words I try to have them remember. So, deliver service. So we're a service organization. We deliver service. Everything we do is a service delivery. Compassion, respect for the people and the environment. So that's how we want to deliver that service. So if you just think about it in the broadest terms and you remember those 6 words, that's enough to get what our vision and the mission for the county is. And where that's important is when an employee is out in the field and they have 2 paths to take, path A or path B. Well, my supervisor's not here to ask them exactly what I should do. Well, think back about this service delivery that you're performing right now, and what's the service route that provides the compassion and respect for the people or the environment that you're working for. So if they think about that, that will help guide them towards the right path to take. We also provide additional guiding principles. We talk about responsibility, treating everyone with respect, building trust through our actions, being transparent, cooperating, and being innovative to provide efficiencies. So think about these guiding principles along with the mission and vision statement, and that helps the employees then determine what is the best route to take. And the more years I've spent in government, when we get further into strategic planning, especially at the county level of government, so much of what we do is mandated. So how we provide the service is probably of importance for our strategic planning. The very details of it is really controlled by state law. So we really don't have a lot of control over that part. All right, now into budgeting. So everyone's favorite time of year, April to November, is the budgeting season. So we will start with the budget next week. We're going to hear from all of the department heads. They're going to talk about things that they see coming up in the 2025 budget. We'll then ask you to quickly turn around and provide us with your budget priorities, so I can get that out to department heads. They can submit their budgets based upon those priorities. We'll review those at standing committees. We'll come back at a committee of the whole in October, and then ask you to adopt that at the November county board meeting. So you'll have plenty of chances to see it as it's developed. But really, that very first meeting, or the meeting when you approve the priorities, that's very important, because that sets the tone for that budget for 2025. So speaking of our budget, how have you guys been doing? Since this is a veteran group, well, it looks like you've been doing great. We have the lowest tax rate, mill rate, in the last 50 years. So we've had 11 consecutive years of decreases. So you go, well, that's great. Is that just St. Croix County, though? Well, if you compare us to the other 72 counties in Wisconsin, we have the 8th lowest mill rate. So we're doing pretty good compared to a lot of our peers. Another way to compare is on a per capita basis. We're still 19th lowest out of the 72 counties and 24% below the state average. So again, you're doing a good job. Any way that you want to compare it, our history based upon the other counties per capita or mill rate, you're doing a good job with the taxes in the county.
Where do we stand in population count for the state of Wisconsin? What's our rank?
18th.
Oh, okay.
Yep, we're the 18th largest county in the state of Wisconsin. So, you know, I show you this and tell you how good of a job you guys are doing, and your constituents say, well, my taxes are high. All right, so I put together a slide to explain why that is. So 49% of our population lives in townships. So the tax bill, if you live in a township, and it varies, that's why I split it out between towns, villages, and cities. If you live in a township, you know, about a quarter of your tax bill is the county. A large percentage is the school districts. So the school districts is what's driving most of it. And I know the county collects a lot of the taxes around for the different jurisdictions. So we get blamed for the tax bill, but we're really not the biggest part of it. If you look at villages, where 18% of our population lives, we're well below 20% of the total tax bill. And again, school districts make up almost half of that, and then villages make up, about a third of the tax bill for them. And cities, not much different. We're just slightly higher, probably average right about 20% for the third of our population that lives within a city limit. And again, school districts are making up about half of it, and the cities are making up about a third of their tax bills. So when people complain about taxes, say, it's not me, we're doing a good job with it. It's everyone else. All right, well, that doesn't work, I don't know. But I just wanted to put it into perspective. You know, the county really is doing a good job. When you compare us to the other counties, St. Croix County is doing a good job with the taxes that we have. So we're providing a lot of value for the amount of money that we're collecting. So that money we collect is $125 million a year. That's the revenues that we have for 2024. And of that $125 million, 36% is the property taxes. So only about a third of our total revenues are even the property taxes. So sales tax 10%, charges for services is 16%. That's, a lot of that's the nursing home. Grants and aids 14%. A lot of that is health and human services. So this is where the money is coming in. Where the money goes out then, health and human services is 29%. Huge division, a lot of employees, a lot of services, virtually entirely mandated by the state of Wisconsin that we provide all those services with no cost control containment at all. Whatever the need is, they're required to provide it. Highway is 16%. Public safety is only 14% of our total budget. If you think about all the public safety departments that you saw report in, they're only 14%. But those three then, highway, health and human services, public safety, those three department heads make up well over half of the entire county budget.
For public safety, can you touch on how much of that is actually funded by county levy and how much is funded by state dollars?
Yeah, I'm not breaking it down in that detail for this meeting, but what I can tell you is that if you look at health and human services, they get about a third of their funding from the tax levy, about a third of their funding from grants, and about a third of their funding from charges for services. If you look at public safety, it's like 99% property taxes supported. They don't have people that are giving them grants. They don't have people that are being charged for services. They do have charges, but those are different. That goes into the circuit court. So yes, different departments have different mixes and ratios. Categorically, that $125 million that we spend, 34% goes into salaries and wages, 14% into benefits, so that's 48%. So roughly half of everything we spend is wages and benefits driven. So when we talk about wage increases or benefit increases, just realize that's half the budget that we're talking about when we talk about those. Debt service is 9%, and capital projects, all the time that we do spend on our KIP, it really only comes out to 3% of the total budget every year. All right, so we talked about wages and benefits that drive a lot of the cost. If you look back over the last decade, in 2016 we're at 560 employees, and for 2024 we're up to 658 employees. So we've gone up nearly 100 employees over this period of time. And so we are a very rapidly growing county. All the wages and benefits associated with them, we've absorbed all of those costs in there and still maintained a low tax rate. So why is the employee count growing? Well, it's because the population is growing. I said at the beginning, we are a service organization. So we provide services as required by the state of Wisconsin, and the more people that you have to serve, the more people we need to serve them. And so it's all directly related. And so everything's tied together, and you can see the population trend of St. Croix County as we continue to increase. The equalized value of the county follows that same trend. So this is both net new construction that's coming into the county, which we typically rank usually in the top 5 in the entire state. And then the equalized value growth is based upon both the appreciated value of your property and those new properties that have come online. That's the net new construction. So we only capture net new construction value. So if you have a vacant lot next to you and somebody builds a house on that, I can capture their new taxes that they're paying to pay for new services. If your property value increased $100,000 in value, I don't capture that. That's how come the tax rate goes down really, is because I'm not able to capture that increase in value. So when we look at the 2025 budget forecast, and this is a quick snapshot of what you're going to see next week on the 25th. So the tax levy rate, I think, will continue to decline. Even with the referendum on there, I believe we will still see a decline in the tax levy rate. Net new construction, you know, it's going to be right in that 750,000 range. I mean, that could swing by a couple 100,000 either way, but it's somewhere around there. Sales tax growth, I'm estimating about $400,000 in new sales tax growth. Don't look at me like that, Supervisor Burning. So that's what I'm anticipating is available for the 2025 budget. All right, so now the expenses. So health insurance premiums, you know, they're going to be anywhere from 5% to 10%. So a 5% increase in health insurance premiums is $500,000. I'm fearful it might be closer to the 10%, which would be $1 million. If you look at what our revenues were, we were just a little over $1 million in revenues coming in. So we've gone a number of years now with a step increase. We haven't missed a year yet, but a step increase averages 2% in wages, which is about $600,000 that I would have to account for to fit that step increase in there. And then also the WPPA union contract is coming up for renewal at the end of 2024. So we will be negotiating a new wage for 25 through 2027 for the Sheriff's Patrol. A 1% increase in their contract is $80,000. So 3% is $240,000. 5% is $400,000. So you can see, I probably do not have enough money to cover all those three things. So something's going to have to give out of those three. Because of that, I don't think there'll be any room for additional positions beyond what the referendum has authorized. That's the information I've been giving to our department heads. I think our debt service will remain flat because of some of the things we've put into place for debt service. But I will forewarn you that we are going to ask for a new debt issuance for some of the 2025 capital projects. See Supervisor Antino getting unsettled already over that. Yeah. The big project that's on there, just so you know, you've seen it coming for a couple of years now. It's the Hudson Highway Shop replacement, and I think that was about $7.5 million. So I don't have enough cash to cover that. The only way that project happens is if you issue additional debt, and that'll require a 3/4 vote of the entire county board. So that's what I'm projecting for the 2025 budget. So we will hear from department heads next week about any other things that they see coming up, and then we can build in where you want the priorities to be, because you know that I won't be able to cover it all. Tell me where the priority is. I will bring you a balanced budget based upon those priorities. Any questions?
I just want to re-emphasize the importance of these budget priorities. We talk about it every year, but that really sets the stage for the entire budget process. So when we get into that here in another month or two, I'll again re-emphasize the critical importance of making sure that we get that right.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things, I really like those charts that you have, thank you. And it was helpful to me, and it might be a tool used moving forward, is one year I took my property taxes and $3,500, let's say, 20% is county, okay? So then I can come up with a dollar amount, and then 16% was highway at that time. And in talking with constituents, I could say, I paid more for my garbage removal at my house than I did for highway services. And those types of comparisons I thought was meaningful because I compared it to something I'm paying today. And it's very interesting. In my book back then was, if you talk about the price of gloves, you can understand it to a normal conversation. But when you talk about the price of a dozer, you know, nobody's going to understand that. And of course, I'd talk about how much it cost per pound, and everybody thought I was crazy. But anyway, that's a neat comparison. But I just thought I'd share that. I thought that was, thank you for those charts.
Supervisor Otino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administrator Witt, you mentioned the small percentage of this KIP based on the whole total picture.
Yep.
I can't read it from here, but it
3%.
2?
3%.
3%. But at the end of the year, at the end of the budget, we put the money in reserve, and that money is always available going forward for KIP projects. Am I correct in that statement?
Yes.
And it's usually 20%. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I don't know about 20%.
Well,
so what we
close.
do, so what we do is after the audit's completed, we take a look at our fund balance. And so we have a fund balance policy of 35% plus or minus 3%. So we have a window that we want to maintain our fund balance. When we're over that, so if we're at 40%, I'm going to say we're at least 2% over. Here's that dollar amount. You're able to reallocate that. Typically, the county board has reallocated that to one of two purposes. One is the KIP, the other one is the debt service, to reduce our debt service expense. But that's where the additional dollars have gone whenever we're over our fund balance policy. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, so it's always kind of free money, in a sense, that's not designated for anything else till the end of that cycle. My request going forward would be, instead of having that as such a large amount of money, to reduce that to 5% or less of the total. There's no reason to have that money. If we would have had that money going into this year, we wouldn't have never had to go to, think of it, we wouldn't have had to go to the public and say, hey, we need more money for public protection, if I'm correct. We would have had that money available.
Yeah, well, the only difference is one-time money and ongoing money. So the positions we're hiring are, we need to fund them every single year going forward. So it's an operational expense. When we end up with money at the end of the year, that's one-time money. Once you've spent that money out of our savings account, that money's gone. So I don't have it for the following year. So that's how come I always recommend one-time uses for one-time money.
Okay, and I agree with that, but why is it such a huge amount of money? Why can't we make it less going forward? and that way we'd have more for budgets. You're already saying that the departments are going to be struggling right now, but that's always been something, I think I've talked to you about it in the past.
Right.
It's always been something that kind of got to me in that aspect, so I would appreciate your consideration if you would look at reducing that amount of money.
Sure.
And
Yeah, well, where that.
using it current year instead of at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we end up with a surplus every year for 3 reasons, I would say. One is sales tax. We budget conservatively on sales tax, so there's a built-in cushion there. 2 is we budget that every position is going to be filled all year long, and so that's not a realistic expectation, really, because we end up with vacancies during the year and departments end up with those savings. And then 3, we get additional revenue sources through the year. So we get a grant that wasn't expected that offsets something that we were already going to do. And so we are able to cover that cost then without having to use the tax levy dollars. And so those are really the 3 reasons that we end up in the black and that we end up with excess funds at the end of the year. So you can do different budgetary tactics to reduce that, but what you risk is that you're off and then you're over and you're in the red. And so that's really not the position that I ever want to be in. I always want to have some money left over at the end of the year because there's some really good uses for that money when we put it into the KIP. Every dollar we put into the KIP and we're able to use to avoid issuing debt for that KIP project means more savings for the taxpayer than if I have to issue the debt, have a debt issuance cost and pay interest on it. So I like having money left over at the end of the year, and we budget conservatively for that specific reason. Yep. No other questions? I will turn it over to Heather, I think for our last session, right, Heather? Yeah. Well, they're both you, so.
Okay, now for the best part of the day. So I'm going to talk to you about open meetings and public records law. And I just think it's important for everybody to know these laws because you as elected officials are responsible for your own records and your own actions. And so that's why we train on it. That's why I try to give, best practices, pointer tips, just so that you guys know what you are required by statute and law to do. So open meetings law. The policy in Wisconsin is that the public should be entitled to the fullest and most complete information regarding the affairs of government. And so that's why Chapter 19, the open meetings law, requires that all meetings of both state and local governmental bodies shall be held publicly in places reasonably accessible to members of the public, shall be open to all citizens at all times unless otherwise expressly provided by law. So when does it apply? Every meeting. And there has been case law on this, so I'll go over that. And all the provisions of the statutes must be liberally construed to achieve the purpose of open government. So I always try to follow as a practice is, that the public should be notified of what's going to happen at the meeting. The agenda items should be very specific, so it gives people the knowledge of what is going to be discussed at the meeting so they can attend or they can watch it on video. So what is a governmental body? The statutes indicate that it includes a state or local agency, board, commission, committee, council, on and on and on. Virtually any collective governmental body, including an advisory body. So the county board and subcommittees are all considered governmental bodies under the statute. So this is recent. It wasn't that recent. It was 7 years ago. There was a case, Kruger v. Appleton Area School District Board of Education, where the Supreme Court decided that a Communication Arts Materials Review Committee was a governmental body and needed to be open to the public when they met to review curriculum. And so after this case came down from the Wisconsin Supreme Court, internally we looked at all the committees and councils that we have to make sure that they were all being publicly noticed. And so the public knew that they could attend those meetings. And there were some that were not being publicly noticed. And so we changed our practice to make sure, a small committee that comes from, HHS department was agendaed correctly, minutes were taken, and it was open to the public. So what is the definition of a meeting? So meeting is the convening of members of a governmental body for the purpose of exercising the responsibilities, authority, power, or duties delegated to or vested in the body. And so we call this the Showers test from another Wisconsin Supreme Court case. And the Showers test is, it is a meeting when there is a purpose to engage in governmental business and the number of members present is sufficient to determine the governmental body's course of action. And if half or more of the members of a governmental body are present, it is rebuttably presumed to be for the purpose of exercising those responsibilities. Now, let's say Hudson football team goes to state, and there are 10 county board supervisors at a football game, and you're sitting next to each other. That is not for the purpose of exercising your responsibility of a county board supervisor. But if all 10 of you are talking about the agenda item that's coming up for the next county board meeting, it could be a meeting. So I just caution you, if you're at a coffee shop, football game, just don't talk about things that are on the agenda. Talk about other things. So the Showers test gives two definitions. First, the purpose to engage in governmental business. So it's any formal or informal action on matters within the governmental body's realm of authority. And that can include discussions, decisions, information gathering. And it also, the Showers test also includes the number of members present. So the power to control the course of action is either affirmative action or a negative power. You could have a negative quorum, which means the number of members sufficient in size to defeat a course of action. So for committee, there's 5 members. If 3 of you are together, that not only constitutes a quorum, but you have enough people to control the course of the vote, either affirmatively to pass it or not to pass it. So technology has been obviously changing, and it does affect open meetings laws. So telephone conferences, video conferences, virtual meetings, chat rooms, Snapchat, instant messaging, they all could become a meeting if certain conditions are met. And most of you have heard me say this before, and I preach it in emails, is that an email can constitute a meeting if you're discussing something that's on an agenda. So I try my best to make sure that we don't use reply all or forwarding, because sometimes those messages can be sent to enough members that would create a quorum. So if you can, do reply all. You'll see when you guys all receive emails from me, I blind copy all the county board supervisors so you can't inadvertently reply all. It's just a useful tip, but it looks like I'm sending the email to all county board supervisors, but you only see your name, and that's because I make sure to blind copy everybody. And it's just a protection feature to make sure there's no reply all. Okay, walking quorums. So a walking quorum is when there's a series of gatherings among separate groups of members, each less than a quorum size, who agree to act uniformly in sufficient numbers to reach a quorum. So this is obviously not allowed under the open meetings law. Those discussions that you have with others need to be on the board floor so the members of the public can hear what you are discussing. A walking quorum produces a predetermined outcome and may render the publicly held meetings a mere formality. So if you, let's say a standing committee, you and another supervisor are having a conversation, you want to make sure that conversation is just between the two of you, and you shouldn't have that same conversation with a third person of that standing committee and agree on how to vote, because that could create a walking quorum, which is a violation of the open meetings law. So it says in here, if there's no tacit or express agreement, exchanges among separate groups of members may take place without violating the open meetings law, but it just cautions you, if it's something that you want to discuss, do it on the board floor. That way everybody in the public can hear what your ideas, what your thoughts are on a resolution or an ordinance. So notice requirements, and obviously the county clerk takes care of a lot of the notice requirements, but it's good for the supervisors to know this information if you were ever questioned by a citizen. But so every meeting shall be preceded by public notice at least 24 hours in advance, unless for good cause. We could give 2 hours notice, but that's only in emergencies. If we need to have a state of emergency implemented, or something that is actually an emergency that the county board needs to address without 24 hours notice. Happens very rarely. We obviously want to give people as much notice as possible as to what's going to be on an agenda so they can attend the meeting if they so choose. The statutes indicate that we must give the time, place, date, subject matter of the meeting, and that it has to be in a form that is reasonably likely to apprise members of the public and the news media thereof. So that's why we have the agenda, and then we also have the agenda packet. And most of the time, the agenda packet will contain, copies of resolutions, statutes, other information that would be helpful to a citizen to know what it is going to be discussed. If a topic or a subject was not specifically noticed and it comes up at a meeting, the governmental body should refrain from engaging in any information gathering or discussion and taking any action that would deprive the public of the information about the governmental business. Accessibilities. So, this building is ADA compliant. We need to make sure it's open to the public at all times, which is why we leave the door open. Even if there's loud commotion in the hallway or construction, we leave the door open so people know this is a public meeting that they can come into. The law does grant citizens the right to tape record or videotape any sessions, as long as doing so does not disrupt the meeting. And the open meetings law also permits the governmental body to set aside a portion of the meeting as public comment. Our public comment period is set forth in the rules governing the Board of Supervisors, and we do allow public comment at county board and committee meetings. Okay, closed session. Here in St. Croix County, we rarely go into closed session, but there are 11 reasons why a body can go into closed session. These are the only times you can go into closed session. There's not a catch-all for whenever you so choose. It's just these 11 examples or exemptions and no others. So if it's a judicial or quasi-judicial hearing, most of these don't apply, obviously, in an administrator form of government, as dismissal, demotion, discipline, that's mostly done by department heads or administrator. Probably the time we would go into closed session would be for number 5, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties or conducting other public business when there's competitive or bargaining implications. Here are the other rest of them, conferring with legal counsel with respect to litigation. It's another time we go into closed sessions. But these are the only 11 times you can go into closed session. So how closed session works is you must convene in open session. The agenda must specifically indicate why you're going into closed session and the statutory exemption for it. Governmental bodies must pass a motion and seconded, and it has to be by a majority vote to convene in closed session. Before voting, the chair must announce and record in open session the nature of the business to be discussed and the specific statutory exemption which is claimed. So you have to do more than just state the statute. You can't just say we're going into closed session pursuant to 1985. It has to be we're going into closed session pursuant to 98.85 for negotiating union contract or conferring with legal counsel regarding litigation strategy in the St. Croix County case. So it has to indicate what you're going into closed session for. And then any voting that may need to be done based on what was discussed in closed session has to happen in open session unless it would compromise the need for closed session. Okay, so enforcement and penalties. So both the Attorney General and the St. Croix County District Attorney have authority to enforce the open meetings law. So a district attorney has authority to enforce the law after it receives a verified complaint. And then if the DA does not want to commence an action, the individual who filed the complaint has the right to bring their own action, or they can ask the Attorney General. And this is the key. So if there is a violation of the open meetings law, a court may void any action that was taken at a meeting held in violation of open meetings law. So that's why we make sure our agendas very specifically indicate the agenda item. And so the citizens know what's being discussed, because if it was just generic, like discussion of public safety, well, what does that mean? And if some action was taken on that agenda item and a court were to find that the open meetings law was violated, then that, whatever decision was made, whatever vote was made, that would basically be voided. So any member of a governmental body who knowingly attends a meeting held in violation of open meetings law may be subject to a forfeiture of between $25 and $300 and may be required to pay attorney's fees. One way that all of you can avoid liability is by asking legal counsel for advice. And if you rely on the advice of legal counsel and it was wrong, you cannot be held liable for that. So if you have a question, call me and I will help walk you through the question and give you advice as to whether or not that's a violation or not a violation. Because if you reasonably relied on, in good faith, on my advice, then you cannot be held liable. So, any questions about open meetings laws? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, regarding the email, you indicated that you blind copy everybody. So if my fingers are so fat doing this on this thing, is if I inadvertently reply to all, because you blind copied folks, they won't all get it.
Correct. It
Just
will only go to me.
Okay, because then let's say I did that inadvertently with my fat fingers. I've seen people where they rescinded something that they inadvertently sent me. Is that valid or what?
It is a good practice. So if you inadvertently do reply all and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to rescind that email. The only problem is sometimes it's too late. Sometimes the supervisor or the other individual on the other end has already read the email. So it looks like you're acting in good faith to try to rescind it. But it might be too late because the other people may already have read it and relied on it.
Yeah, I believe our system is designed to hold an email for 10 seconds before it actually sends it. So that resend button is really only good for the first 10 seconds.
Because
not after the 10 seconds up, it's gone. You won't actually get it back. They're still going to get a copy. They're going to get a second email that says this email's been recalled, but they're still going to have the original in their box also.
Because I've received one and then I've gotten another one to say, so I deleted it right away. I never opened it or anything like that. If that person was challenged and I said I deleted it, is that confirmation enough, or do you have to?
Yes, I mean, that is helpful, obviously. So if someone, let's say, was brought by the district attorneys for a charge of violating open meetings law, it would be helpful for the person who sent the email to know who deleted it, who didn't delete it. That might be gathered in an affidavit or deposition. So yes, I mean, if you receive one and someone says, that was a mistake, please delete it, please delete it. It just helps in the long run. Don't read it because it happens. We try to prevent it as much as we can, but yes, that would be my best practice tip on that.
The key here is if it's an agenda item, is that correct? Because if I wanted to discuss with a couple supervisors painting the curbs in the parking lot here in the future bright orange, that would be a future thing and not an agenda item, and I could discuss that.
Correct.
Well, if it's subject to a future agenda item, then no. If
Okay.
it's something they would have authority to take action on.
It would be hard. It's hard because you don't know what agenda items are going to be 6 months from now, right?
Oh,
But
so
if,
that would put me in jeopardy.
it could. If you think it's something that's going to be a future agenda item, so like in general, let's say you're discussing with 3 other county board supervisors, I don't want taxes to go up. Okay, that's a general discussion, right? But if you're talking about when, let's say, a referendum is going to be on the agenda for 6 months, and I'm going to vote no at the county board meeting, and these are all the reasons why, if you have enough people that you tell that to, that it creates a walking quorum, you could be subject to the open meetings law.
Okay, so the way to be safe with that is just tell one at a time. Sorry.
I'm not going to answer that. Oh, but I will say you could create a walking quorum.
Supervisor Carlson.
Oh, microphone.
And so he's asking with the intent, he wants to get it on agenda later and just wants to find out if there's enough support. That would probably violate it or not?
That would probably
Okay.
violate it, yes.
And the purpose of that is because we want that discussion to happen here, right in this forum, so that the public can hear why Supervisor Otino wants it or why Supervisor Carlson doesn't want it, so that they know whether to vote for you next time or not. If all that discussion happens behind closed doors, they don't know what your reasoning is, they don't know whether they agree with you or don't agree with you.
Supervisor Burning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that inside of the technology that we have, we can make it so it's an extra step to hit that reply all button. I believe that we should talk to John to see if he can just at least make it so it's one extra step to do the reply all. I have no problem with it, but I know not everyone. Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think we should look into that because I think you can do that. Keyword, I think you can. So I think we should look into that without, if there's any.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
Okay.
Good reminder.
Last session, public records law. All right, so this is also where technology has not kept up with the statute. So what is a record? Chapter 19 contains both public records law and open meetings law. So they kind of go hand in hand. So what is a record? It's any material on which written, drawn, printed, spoken, visual, electromagnetic information is recorded or preserved. And so it can be a letter, a physical letter. It could be an email. It could be a Snapchat. It can be a TikTok. It can be things you post on Facebook. So all those things are records, and that has changed obviously a lot in the last 20 years with technology. So the content determines whether it's a record, not the form of it. So if you have a email that has something about governmental business, that's a record. But not everything a public official or employee creates is a public record. It must be created or kept in connection with official purpose or function of the agency, which I'll go through a little bit. So what is not a record? Drafts, notes, preliminary documents, however, this needs to be narrowly construed. You cannot just label something draft just to protect it from the public records law. If it's a draft, but you shared it with all 19 county board supervisors, it's not really a draft. It might be a draft still, but it's still considered a record. Things that are published and available for sale at a library, not a record. Anything that's purely personal property. So if I use my county email to email my brother and say, hey, are you going to grandma's on Saturday? Like that's purely personal, but I'm using a governmental computer to send it. So then there has to be a determination whether or not that's a record under the statute. Material with limited access rights, so copyrighted materials are not a record, and then does not include an identical copy of a record. So this is a very long definition that's in the statutes about who is the authority. So for purposes of this presentation, you are elected officials. You are the authority that has custody of your records. I'll get into how the county assists you with maintaining some of those records, but technically you are the elected official. You personally are the elected official that has custody of your own records. So legal custodians are vested with the full legal power to render decisions and carry out public records responsibilities. An elected official, so all of you, but you can designate an employee to act on your behalf. Often where corporation counsel comes in, I will assist you with responding to public records requests. Chairperson of a committee, and a requester, on the other hand, is any person who requests to inspect or to get a copy of a record. And there's limited rights for those individuals that are committed under a Chapter 51 mental health commitment or if they're incarcerated. So the request, it doesn't have to be, I am making a public records request for this. There's no magic words that need to be said. It must reasonably describe the information or records requested. So for instance, if a requester says, I want all emails that Heather Amos sent on March 1st. That's reasonably specific as to time. It's not reasonably specific as to subject matter. So it would need to say all emails of Heather Amos from March 1st regarding XYZ resolution. That would be specific as to subject matter. So you as the custodian shouldn't have to guess what the requester is wanting. And you also do not have to respond to continuing requests. So let's say someone today says, I want all emails sent by Heather Amos to Ken Witt for the next 6 months. That's not contemplated by the public records law. It is not allowed. You don't have to respond to continuing requests. Public records request in itself is actually a record, so those have to be maintained also. Okay, you cannot deny a request because it calls for a lot of records. At some point, it may become an overly broad and overly burdensome request that would warrant rejection, but just because there's going to be 400 pages of agendas that will be provided to somebody under a request, just because it's a lot of records doesn't mean you don't have to fill it. You can contact the requester and say, I'm confused by your request. Can you clarify? What did you mean by this? But you have to be careful that you're not chilling that requester's right to exercise the request under the public records law. So you shouldn't say, I received your request. It's going to be really a lot of records. Could you change your request? You shouldn't do that. But you can say, hey, I received your request. I don't see a time frame on here. You know, what date frame are you looking for those records from? Okay, this often trips people up when I present regarding public records law, but the requester doesn't have to state why they're requesting it. They don't have to identify themselves. They don't have to indicate their motive for requesting the records. As I indicated before, there are limitations on requests by prisoners and committed persons, depending on what they're requesting, if it may affect the safety of the facility they're in. Also, a requester has greater rights to records about them personally than they do about other people. So let's say Joe Smith requests records from the sheriff's office regarding all crimes that he committed. He would have a greater access to those records than a person that's not that person. So especially if it's a sensitive crime, like a sexual assault or whatever, another person may not have the same access to all the details about the victim, etc. So
Supervisor Rice?
I question the bullet item here that says generally need not identify himself or herself.
Yes. So the requester doesn't have to say, I am Joe Schmo from Hudson, Wisconsin. It can be completely anonymous. So requesters do not have to identify themselves, and I would say that's more common nowadays, especially with email. When you can create a Gmail that's, anonymous at gmail.com. They do not need to identify himself or herself. However, that may affect what records that person can get. If you don't know who that person is and they don't want to identify themselves, then some records they may not be able to get access to. For example, let's say an anonymous person reaches out to Child Protection and says, I want all records regarding this child. Well, without knowing that identity of that person, if they're a parent, mostly just a parent or a guardian, then they would not get those records. But if they were a parent and identified them as such, we could confirm that they are, this child's parent, then they have more access to records. So I would imagine that a lot of you would receive emails requesting records, or just, a complaint that's from anonymous, or they don't want to disclose their name and they're not required to under the law.
Supervisor Van Summeren?
So are we obligated to respond to those requests, even if it's
yes,
out into the air?
That's my next slide. Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
yes.
Sorry.
Good timing. A response is a response is required, so you have to respond no matter what. Typically, when people receive requests, and most of the time it's going to take a couple days or weeks to get those records, I always recommend responding with, I've received your request. I will respond as soon as practicable and without delay. The reason I use that language is that is what the Attorney General has indicated and the statutes indicate as to how quickly you need to respond. Now, the Attorney General indicates that 10 business days is typically an appropriate amount of time to respond for a simple request. But if the request is for, hundreds of records that you don't even know where they're located, you take as much time as you need. You just have to keep the requester apprised of how long it's taking. But yes, you have to respond no matter what. Doesn't matter their identity, you have to respond. I think Supervisor Summering has a question.
No, it's interesting because that goes completely contrary to what everyone talks about, the spamming and things like that. If you get something you don't know, delete it right away. Yeah. That comes as a directive from our computer guy.
Yes.
So how do we know if it's for real or if it's not for real? And do we want to be put in the position of making a mistake if it's not for real?
That is a good question, and John's not here right now, but if it appears to be a phishing scam, you guys have been trained on the phishing tool, right, in Outlook. So always, if you think it's a scam, there's the phishing icon, and then I think IT would tell you, you get an email saying this isn't a scam or not. But that's a very good question. How do you know it's from a legitimate source? Yeah, I would say maybe reach out to me also if you get one that appears to be like, hey, I'm questioning if this is spam. And most of the time, what I would advise you, if you get a records request and it's something that is not just one email, you can always ask for our assistance. But I think I will have to talk to John Allegro. Maybe I can get more guidance to you, but that is a legitimate concern. Us at the county, we receive phishing and spam attempts all the time. And so if you obviously think it's that, at least you're acting in good faith by reporting it as phishing. And if you don't reply because you believe it's a phishing scam and then you get another one, well, then maybe we'll have to look at it a little bit closer. But if you're acting in good faith and not just deleting it because you don't want to answer it, you're deleting it because IT has marked it as phishing and it's not a legitimate email. But that is a very good question that I don't think has been really vetted out in the court system yet, but it is a legitimate concern.
I'll just add I had that happen to me a couple times this past year where somebody would get a text message that looks like it was from me, but it wasn't. So they'd call me and say, hey, did you send this message or what's going on? So that has happened legitimately a couple times this past year. Supervisor Ramberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is maybe more for Ken, but looking at some of the punitive damages and different things that a lot of this is de minimis, but if we inadvertently do so, are we covered under like errors and omissions on our insurance or anything as county board members?
I hate to tell you yes, but yes. We have some insurance coverages. Some, yeah.
Supervisor Barkalow.
Thank you, Chair. Just clarification on the statute. You said electromagnetic record. Does that also include VHS, Betamax, cassette tapes, 8-tracks, but not vinyl?
I think it includes all of that. No, just kidding. Not vinyl, that makes sense. But
and seriously, what is the clarification further?
It's all of those things. So, I mean, we have microfiche film that way back in the day. And so all those are records that are subject to the public records law. So anything that you can record something on, so a cassette tape, a VHS tape, those are all records if they contain, information regarding governmental business. But the statutes have not caught up with recent technology. So it says all those things, but it doesn't say social media, but the courts have interpreted that social media is included. So.
Thank you.
Supervisor Carlson.
With his concern over the penalties and if we do it wrong, and are we not covered if we not sure if we ask corporate counsel for advice and she gives us advice, then we're not covered anymore. Did I read that correctly from earlier?
I think the insurance coverage would still apply, but it would probably cover me, not you. Obviously I have a law license I have to keep up and I could be subject to something with the Office of Lawyer Regulation, but yes. If you're acting in good faith and you receive advice from the Corporation Counsel and you follow that advice, then you're less likely to be liable. So that's why, and I've received calls from county board supervisors saying, hey, I'm thinking I would want to post this. Can I do that? Is that violating any laws? And I don't mind any of you calling me or emailing me or texting me and asking that question. Email's usually easier, or a phone call is usually easier. We can have that back and forth and I can get the details and kind of find out what it is that you're trying to do. But yes, I would say always rely on the advice of Corp Counsel if you think.
Just remember, we're here to help you. So if you have an open record request, just reach out. I mean, we're a service organization. That is our service that we provide to you.
Yeah, I can add that I've had numerous open records requests from a variety of people over the past 2 years, and I send them immediately to Corporation Counsel, and John has been tremendous on collecting everything that needs to be collected, and then the response is made, and I didn't really have to do anything. So there's a really good process in place, so you can feel a little more comfortable than what we're hearing.
Yes, and I'll get to the best practices, and that is exactly what my advice will be. So.
Yes, go ahead.
So you will receive requests from time to time that you kind of are like, well, hello, that's already on the website, or that's, if it's something that you, like Heather, our Corporation Counsel had stated, just reply back and say you're not the custodian of this record, and if you want to be kind, maybe you could send a link to the website for an agenda piece or something that was passed. It's just make sure that your response is prudent and kind and courteous and not combative, I think is the big thing. But like Mr. Chair said, include Heather on Corporation Counsel on these.
And that's a good point too. Some of the things that you may be requested to provide, you're not the custodian of the record. You're not the custodian of the agendas, the county clerk is. And so that's a good tip, that if you receive something, you can say, I'm not the custodian of that record. However, here's the link to the website, or you may want to reach out to the county clerk, things like that. So you're being helpful and responding to the citizen, but it's not your record to retain. So the law does indicate that a requester may choose to either inspect the records or obtain copies. There's some statutes that only allow people to inspect and not actually receive copies. Those are mostly in the Children's Services CPS world. We do have to provide facilities for individuals if they do want to inspect the records. We may impose reasonable restrictions on the manner of accessing the original records. Specifically, the clerk of court's office does this. They don't give people the file and say, here, you can take it and then tell me what you want. They have law library with a computer, and then whatever record they want, they print off for them. But a requester is entitled to a copy of a record if requested. This includes audio and videotapes, voice messages. For the county, we receive a lot of them via email or voice messages, so those are also records that can be released. Okay, so if an authority does withhold a record or part of a record or delays granting access, so like you're never going to respond to it, you just delay, an individual can bring an action for a mandamus asking the court, there's a typo, my apologies, the court to order release. And that individual may also request the DA's office or Attorney General to file a mandamus on their behalf. Penalties include attorney's fees, damages of not less than $100, and any other actual costs. Okay, so now best practices. Sorry, the slide is a little small. So emails and text messages. Emails are records subject to disclosure. My practice tip for you is if you also have a personal email that your constituents are emailing you at, forward those emails onto your county email and then respond to it from the county email. That way, the county email has all the records. If you ever get a records request, we know we can just look into Outlook at the county level that the IT department retains. Otherwise, if you have some records in your personal email, some records in your county email, you may need to work with someone at the county to make sure we have all the responsive records. And I don't want to go through your personal emails. I've had to do that before. I don't want to do that. So it's just a good tip. If you get something on your personal email, forward it to your county email, respond from there. Personal emails generally are not subject to disclosure. So the example I gave, if you guys use your county email address and email your sibling or your spouse and say, I'm going to be late for dinner, that is not a record that would be released in a public records request unless it shows that you're not doing your duty as a county board supervisor. If like you have 10,000 emails a day on the county server and they're all purely personal, it may show that you're not utilizing the government computers correctly, but otherwise they're purely personal, they're not subject to disclosure. And that's, a purely personal email is one that has no connection to a government function. Text messages are records and subject to disclosure, and I think these are more difficult to retain, especially it's your personal phone, right? And so you are the custodian of that record. If you get a request for all text messages between you and another supervisor from this date period, you have to review those, and if they meet their criteria of that request, you'll have to provide them. Now, how do you do that? You have to screenshot them. There's different ways that you would have to get those from your phone. So it just makes it more difficult. Obviously, phone call is probably better than a text message. Phone call in itself, there's not a record made unless you're recording it. So text messages are subject to the public records law. So again, best practices, I'll just repeat it again. Use your county issued email address to communicate with constituents. Forward any emails from your personal email onto your county issued email. Respond from that account. If you receive a text message regarding a governmental issue, retain that record. And again, best practice is not to send or receive text messages on a personal phone regarding county business. Okay, social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, they're all good ways to communicate with a large number of users, especially if you're trying to communicate with your constituents. Facebook has been used quite a bit, but it's also a good way to get into trouble with a large number of users. As an elected official, you are required to retain any comments you make regarding county business from your social media. So I recommend to have 2 separate accounts. So if you have your personal Facebook account, maybe you also have a county board supervisor Facebook account, and anything you want to tell your constituents, you do through that. I would recommend that you put on here, I'm a county board supervisor for district whatever, St. Croix County. These are my thoughts and opinions, so people know this is your county board supervisor page. And that way, if you get a public records request for anything you put on social media, hopefully it will be on your county used Facebook page instead of your personal one. That's just a best practice. Be smart, professional, do not share fake news, confidential information, rumors. If you're going to comment on your Facebook page, like there's a resolution coming up and I'm in support of it and these are all the reasons why, just know that could create an open meetings violation if you start then communicating that with more county board supervisors. So maybe you turn the comments off, or maybe you think twice about, making that statement, but sometimes that's the way to get the information to your constituents and your citizens.
Supervisor Carlson.
Yeah, there was a recent case where if on your personal Facebook page you're doing official business, as soon as you start doing that at all, anything official, you can't ban anybody from your page if they're allowed to see it, because now you made it official and you can't ban anybody. So some people got themselves in trouble for doing that.
Yes, and that recent case I can email to everybody if you're interested, but that's why it's very important to try to separate your accounts if you can. You don't want to get into any of those, if there's an angry citizen saying, well, now you can't block me, you can't ban me because, these other people have commented, why are you blocking me? So it does create issues. I tell this to everybody at the county, and I'll tell you guys too, treat social media like you're talking to the news media. Assume that anything you say will be on the news, paper, it can be taken out of context. Don't post or share anything that you would not want to be printed on the front page of the newspaper. You'll think that maybe if I send this email to this one person, nobody else will get it, but you don't know. You don't know who that other person is forwarding information onto. So just rule of thumb, don't post or share anything that you want to be on the news. And be clear that you're stating your own individual opinion unless it's an opinion already adopted by the county board. Okay, if you receive a request, you can contact me. As Chair Long indicated, you can just forward it right on to me. He usually copies John Allegro also, because John can then get me all the records that may be responsive. Call, email, whatever's the easiest. But as far as like your personal cell phone and your social media accounts, just remember you're the custodian of those records. And so the county can't really help you retain those because we don't want access to your usernames and passwords and all that information, but just know, retain the documents and respond to requests if they're made. Questions? And if you don't know, just call and ask. I don't mind the questions. It's 1 year, I think that was probably at least half my job was responding to public records requests. So I've become used to going through items and making sure, what's responsive, what's not. And it's more difficult for elected officials just because you have so many mediums that you can communicate with people. So any other questions? And a job too, like Supervisor Burning said.
Much.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, we're actually luckily toward the end of our meeting. Thank you for hanging in there. A couple of announcements on I believe it's Friday.
Yeah, so under the announcements, we have several meetings coming up. So the county facilities tour this Friday, Supervisor Rice is not available, so we're going to reschedule that. But is anyone else interested in attending that? Well, I'll make sure I coordinate with your schedule. Burning, Van Summeren. Okay, hold on just a second.
You can just set it, like don't coordinate around trustee, don't coordinate around my schedule.
Yeah. All right. So if there's a number of you that wanted to attend this Friday, we'll keep this Friday, and then we'll just do a second tour. So it's going to start at 8:30 in the morning, and it usually takes most of the day. We usually finish around 3:30. Because we'll take you all around the county to see the major facilities that we have. All right. So who over on this side was interested? Van Summeren, Swanepoel.
We are not doing it this Friday?
Well, we can. If there's that much interest in it, I will do it this Friday, and then I will just schedule a separate date and offer it again.
Can you do it Friday? Okay. I will do it Friday if there's enough people.
All right. So Burning, Van Summeren, Swanepoel. Carlson, you want to do this Friday? Okay. This Friday. Osnes? You haven't seen any of the county facilities yet, Dave? Yeah. All right. We'll make sure we get you along, Supervisor Osnes. All right, so for this Friday, 8:30, meet here in the admin suite. So Supervisor Burning, Van Summeren, Swanepoel, Carlson, Osnes. Did I miss anyone? Mueller. All right, very good. And then we'll schedule a separate one at a future date for you, Supervisor Rice. And then the other items on there, Committee of the Whole, you all need to come to that. That's the start of the budget. You are the Committee of the Whole, so without you, we are not whole.
I think he has a question.
Is it picture day that day or not?
No, because Supervisor Fiedler will not be at the Committee of the Whole.
We can't have it without him.
Yeah. So we will plan on redoing or doing the county board photo. We have a photo dating back, many, many decades of all the different county boards. So we want to make sure we get this board included. But it's nice when we can get everyone in there. We don't have to Photoshop Sean into it. So he was Photoshopped into the last one. Yeah. So we will plan on doing the photo before the May County Board. Anyone missing the May 7th County Board meeting? No. All right. We will plan on doing the photo then just before the meeting, so we'll probably schedule something at 4:45. Can you make that, Supervisor Anderson? Probably. All right, very good. Yeah. And then the last two announcements were the WCA district meeting, April 29th, and the new officials workshop on May 8th. I've been to a new officials workshop before. It's very good. If you've never been to one, I'd recommend it. To sign up for either of those, talk to the county clerk, and she will have a list that she will register you then. All right.
Okay, any other announcements? Well, it's 1:38. We made it. We're adjourned. Very good.